Chapter 37:20. Since it was a joyous occasion, they were certain that Gu Jinglian would not act up on such a joyous occasion. Hence, they went all out. There was a long corridor leading to the boudoir, and it was covered with shiatsu boards. What are these? The groomsmen squatted on the ground and touched them with their hands. They did not feel anything just by touching them, but if they took off their shoes and stepped on them directly, the feeling was indescribable. How do we do this? The bridesmaids said, "Groomsmen, take off your shoes and carry the groom over." Gu Jinglian was speechless. The groomsmen and the band of brothers fell silent. This was King crazy. If you don't pass this obstacle, you can't enter this door. The bridesmaids spoke again, their attitude firm. The band of brothers had nothing to say. They exchanged glances with the groomsmen and had no choice but to take off their shoes and try stepping on the shiatsu board. It was itchy and painful, so they immediately retracted their feet. "I'd rather step on the tip of a knife than step on this thing. That's right. It makes the soles of my feet itchy and painful." The bridesmaids laughed. "No way." Gu Jinglian's expression turned cold. "Hurry up." Since the devil had spoken, the others did not dare to delay. They quickly took off their shoes and lifted Gu Jinglian up. Two of them held his arms, and another two lifted his long legs. The four of them formed a human palanquin and carried Gu Jinglian onto the shiatsu board. The group of people wailed in pain. All sorts of screams were heard. "Sister-in-law, spare us. Sister-in-law, it hurts. Hurry up and come out to help us. Sister-in-law, let us go. We came here sincerely to pick up the bride." The group of people wailed like ghosts and howled like wolves, but there was no response from inside the door. It seemed that Chu Ho was determined to ignore them. The band of brothers could only grit their teeth and close their eyes. They endured the excruciating pain in the soles of their feet and carried Gu Jinglian to the door. The shiatsu board was only a few meters long, but it took them a few minutes. The brothers put Gu Jinglian down. The groomsmen also took off their shoes and walked over. They knocked on the door and said flatteringly, "Sister-in-law, we're here. Open the door." Inside, the sisters and bridesmaids were blocking the door, but they did not let him in. Gu Jinglian turned the door handle, but the door was locked from the inside. It seemed that it would not be easy to get in. The groomsmen were also sensible. They immediately stuffed a large amount of red packets into the gap of the door. However, even after a large stack of red packets was stuffed in, the bridesmaid inside only cared about taking the red packets and refused to open the door. "Open the door. I've given you so many red packets. Why won't you let me in?" "That's right, we groom can't wait. There's not much time left. Don't miss the auspicious hour. Groom, did you see the ribbon under the door?" When Gu Jinglian heard this, he looked down. Sure enough, there were a few red ribbons under the door. "I saw it. One of the ribbons is tied to the bride's wrist. If you can pick the ribbon tied to the bride's wrist, you can enter the door." Gu Jinglian squatted at the door and counted. There were a total of 10 red ribbons. However, only one of the 10 ribbons was tied to Chu Ho's wrist. It seemed that it would be difficult to pick that one. The groomsmen also became nervous. Chapter 37:21. The best man patted his chest and said, "Push-ups are nothing. Mr. Gu, don't worry about it. We can do 100 push-ups evenly." As soon as he finished speaking, the person behind the door said slowly, "It's not that everyone has to do 100 push-ups. It's that everyone has to do 100 push-ups." Everyone was silent. "That's too harsh." "That's right. How is it possible to pick 1 out of 10 in such a short time?" The bridesmaid inside said disapprovingly, "I just heard someone say that push-ups are nothing." Everyone was silent again. 100 push-ups it is. It's not like you can't do it. Gu Jinglian directly picked one and pulled it out in one go. There was a burst of booing in the room. "That's wrong, that's wrong. 100 push-ups. 100 push-ups take up too much time. 50 would be more efficient. Then give the remaining 50 to him in a red packet." Since the bridesmaid had spoken, the best man naturally quickly stuffed the red packet through the crack of the door. There were only red packets. Anything that could be solved with red packets was a small matter. After stuffing the red packets, the best man nimbly finished the 50 push-ups. These 50 push-ups were naturally a piece of cake for Gu Jinglian. In just a few minutes, he finished all the push-ups. Continue. There were only 9 ribbons left. In the name of it, this game of picking up the bride was a test of telepathy. However, in reality, it was purely based on luck. If it was purely based on luck, it would be hard to say. Probability was the most difficult thing to figure out. Gu Jinglian narrowed his eyes and looked at the ribbons one by one. He carefully compared them and suddenly realized that there was something fishy about one of the ribbons. There were obvious signs of a knot. Gu Jinglian immediately grabbed the ribbon and pulled it back. As expected, this ribbon was connected to the ribbon on the bride's wrist. It immediately tightened. When the best man saw this, he was surprised that Gu Jinglian could pick the ribbon so quickly. While looking at him covetously, they asked, "Is this the one?" It sounded like the bridesmaid's answer was a little reluctant. It seemed that this was the one. "Can you open the door now?" The best man said angrily, "You just said that as long as we get the ribbon, we can go in and pick up the bride. Open the door." The bridesmaids at the door did not seem to dare to make things too difficult for Gu Jinglian. Although they were very reluctant, they had no choice but to open the door. As soon as the door opened a crack, the groomsmen rushed forward and pushed the door open with force. Gu Jinglian walked in casually. As soon as he appeared in the boudoir, he was dressed in a suit and had an extraordinary aura. In a traditional wedding ceremony, the groom would often go out looking good, but in the process of receiving the bride, he would be embarrassed by the bridesmaids. However, this was where Gu Jinglian's power lay. With him present, no one dared to make things difficult for him. In just half an hour, Gu Jinglian had easily entered her room. It had to be said that Gu Jinglian was somewhat frightening. No one dared to offend the demon king of the Gu clan. Even the members of the Gu family stepped back because of Gu Jinglian's aura. Chapter 3722. Gu Jinglian walked in. Naturally, the bridesmaids had prepared a series of game shows. However, Gu Jinglian had already prepared for it. The groomsmen that he had formed were all talented gamers. They were all experts in nightclubs. Thus, each of them showed their prowess and resolved many difficult and dangerous games. The bridesmaids racked their brains and used all their tricks. However, when faced with Gu Jinglian's groomsmen, they were at their wits' end. The photographer in charge of the itinerary immediately said, "Groom, lift the bride's veil and kiss the bride." As he spoke, the photographer raised the camera and aimed it at Gu Jinglian. Obviously, he wanted to capture this classic scene. Gu Jinglian walked to the bedside and looked at Chu Ho, who was sitting cross-legged on the bed. She was wearing a traditional Chinese and phoenix robe and a red veil. She looked very charming. From the moment he walked in until now, she had not said a word. She had been silent the entire time. Was she nervous? Gu Jinglian was a little doubtful. This was the first time in her life that she had experienced a wedding. Could she be so nervous that she could not speak? Just as he was about to reach out and lift Chu Ho's veil, the photographer immediately said, "Does the groom want to say a few words to the bride?" Gu Jinglian raised his eyebrows and looked at him with some confusion. "Say what?" "Some romantic confessions. Or, you can say some promises." "I didn't prepare anything." Everyone was silent. However, Gu Jinglian's reaction was not very surprising. After all, with his personality, he might not be able to lower himself to prepare some mushy and pretentious confessions. He had never cared about things that were too superficial and superficial. The photographer was still encouraging him. "Just say a few words." Gu Jinglian pursed his lips. His gloomy expression made everyone present feel that the atmosphere was a little cold. The aura that emanated from his body filled every inch of the room. Even the cameraman was shivering from the cold. So cold, so scary, he was not a member of the Gu family. Instead, he was a photographer that Uncle Fu had specially hired to record every happy moment of the wedding. Uncle Fu had specially instructed him to make the video as heartwarming and romantic as possible. He wanted to make it into a video so that he could keep it as a precious memory in the future. However, this bridegroom was quite uncooperative. The photographer silently picked up his DSLR with an expression that said, "Please go ahead." He didn't dare to say anything else. Gu Jinglian turned around and his gaze fell on the bride. He gently reached out his hands and slowly lifted the corner of the veil. Everyone was so nervous that they held their breaths. The bridesmaids, on the other hand, were grinning wickedly. As the veil was slowly lifted, what was revealed was not Chu Ho's delicate and beautiful face, but a man's extremely rough jaw. Then, the face of an unfamiliar man was exposed in front of Gu Jinglian. The bride wasn't Chu Ho. The person sitting on the bed was only wearing the wedding gown and a veil. Until now, he had not realized that the bride on the bed was not Chu Ho at all. Gu Jinglian was speechless. The bride had been switched. He had deliberately broken in, but he did not expect that the bride he had prepared to welcome would disappear into thin air and be replaced by a rough stranger. D***. Chapter 37:23. The scene froze for a moment, and the air seemed to have frozen. After a long period of dead silence, the crowd suddenly burst into laughter. Haha. Even the groomsmen fell to the ground laughing. This scene was really too impactful. Gu Jinglian stood in front of the bed in his suit, his face ashen. However, on the bed, there was a man wearing a phoenix coronet and a red robe. It was really frightening. The fake bride actually acted coy and pretended to be a woman as she threw herself at Gu Jinglian and said coquettishly in a rough voice, "Groom, what's wrong with you? I've been waiting for you for a long time." The crowd roared with laughter again. However, Gu Jinglian smiled and stared at him coldly. In the next second, a voice as cold as ice escaped from his throat. "Where is she?" Whoosh. It was as if the Arctic wind had blown past. The people present could not laugh at all. It was as if they had been frozen into ice sculptures. It was so cold. Originally, they had good intentions. They wanted to add some fun to the wedding and make it more festive. However, Gu Jinglian did not seem to like it very much, not happy. Such a joke. He looked coldly at the fake bride on the bed and said indifferently, "If you don't hand her over, I'll break your bones." Gulp. Gulp. Everyone subconsciously swallowed and trembled in fear. Save me. This must be the scariest groom in history. Seeing that no one spoke, Gu Jinglian turned around abruptly. His gaze fell on the bridesmaids and he questioned, "Where's the bride?" She's here, next door." Upon hearing this, Gu Jinglian left the group of people in the room and strode towards the room next door. The room next door was not locked from the inside. Gu Jinglian turned the doorknob and pushed the door open. The room next door was also decorated with a festive atmosphere. It was decorated in an antique style, with a large bed made of solid wood and a Chinese dressing mirror. A bride was sitting on a chair in front of the Chinese-style mirror. Her red veil covered her entire face, so her appearance could not be seen clearly. However, this time, Gu Jinglian was a little more careful. He observed carefully. Based on the outline of the bride's body, he was almost certain that the bride in front of him was the real Chu Ho. When Chu Ho heard someone approaching the room, he felt inexplicably nervous. For some reason, she could not see who the person in front of her was because of the red veil covering her face. However, she was certain that the person in front of her was Gu Jinglian. The familiar temperament, the cold aura, she was sure, he was here. Chu Ho actually felt a little nervous. Her fingers were intertwined and her palms were covered in a thin layer of sweat. Gu Jinglian looked at her, but he was at a loss for words. He actually did not know what to say. The groomsmen and bridesmaids also rushed into the room. The room was not very big, so the others could only stand outside the door and watch. However, they saw Gu Jinglian standing in front of Chu Ho, not saying a word for a long time. "Bride, the groom is here to pick you up," one of the groomsmen said enthusiastically, but this made Chu Ho even more nervous. Gu Jinglian gently squatted down. His usually cold and arrogant expression showed a rare tenderness. He had never been good with words. In his silence, he reached out and gently placed his hand on the back of hers. His large palm lifted her hand and wrapped it in his palm. Her hand was not as delicate as other women's. Years of training had left a thin layer of calluses on her palm. Chapter 37:24. Holding her warm hand, ripples appeared in Gu Jinglian's heart. An imperceptible tenderness spread out in circles without a trace. Gu Jinglian gently rubbed her hand and asked calmly, "Come with me, okay?" Chu Ho didn't speak. Her red lips opened, but they were so dry that she couldn't form a coherent sentence. The bridesmaid reminded him carefully, "Groom, the bride's shoes have been hidden. You have to find them before you can leave." When Gu Jinglian heard this, he suddenly stood up and began to search the room. Even with his searching skills, he couldn't find the red wedding shoes that the bridesmaids had tried so hard to hide. The groomsmen were also anxious. Where are the shoes? However, they knew how to deal with this situation. They immediately walked to the bridesmaids with more than 10 red packets and smiled ingratiatingly. "Good sister, where did you hide the bride's wedding shoes?" The bridesmaids exchanged playful glances with each other. "How can we give you a hint so casually? If you want to give us a hint, you should at least give us something." The groomsmen looked at each other. They knew that this amount of red packets wasn't enough to get them to reveal anything. Thus, they took out all the red packets from their bags and presented them to the bridesmaids. "Good sister, this should be enough. You should be able to give us a hint now." The bridesmaids accepted the red packets with a smile and winked mysteriously. Isn't there a saying that goes, 100 years of cultivation is needed to cross the sea on the same boat? 100 years of cultivation is needed to cross the sea on the same boat? This time, everyone was even more puzzled. How could there be a boat in such a small room? 100 years of cultivation is needed to cross the sea on the same boat? Could it be that the wedding shoes were hidden in the model of the boat? Is there a model of the boat in the room? Yes. The model of the boat might be placed together with the model. The groomsmen started to suggest ideas. However, when they said this, the bridesmaids laughed in disdain. What idiots! They already said that it was a hint. If there really was a model of the boat, how could they give such an obvious hint? While the groomsmen were searching for the model of the ship in the room, Gu Jinglian strode to the bed, lifted the quilt with one hand, and grabbed the pillow. Everyone followed his gaze and saw a pair of bright red wedding shoes quietly hidden under the pillow. At this moment, everyone finally understood. The hint of the phrase, 100 years of cultivation leads to crossing the same boat, should be the next sentence. 1,000 years of cultivation leads to sleeping on the same pillow. This sleeping on the same pillow. Sleeping on the same pillow? Wasn't the wedding shoes hidden under the pillow? It had to be said that these bridesmaids were quite smart. They were quite particular about hiding the wedding shoes. At the same time, she was impressed by Gu Jinglian's shrewdness. He immediately guessed the hiding place of the wedding shoes. After finding the wedding shoes, Gu Jinglian walked over to Chu Ho with them. He looked at her deeply and suddenly knelt on one knee. He gently lifted one of Chu He's legs, and under the fringed hem of her skirt, a fair and delicate foot fell into his palm. He held her foot with one hand and slowly put a red high heel on her heel with the other. When he had put on the wedding shoes for her, Gu Jinglian looked up and gently lifted the veil. At this moment, Chu Ho's face was extremely red with embarrassment. Chapter 37:25. Gu Jinglian also noticed her blushing face. Although she had applied blush on her face, he could still tell if it was blush or shyness. Knowing that she was shy, Gu Jinglian did not point it out. Instead, he asked seriously, "Can I kiss my bride now?" Chu Ho pursed her lips, but her shoulders shrunk. She did not expect Gu Jinglian to be like other men and say things that made one's heart pound like thunder. However, when he said that, she did not feel that he was being frivolous. Instead, she felt a sweet feeling growing from the bottom of her heart. Everyone saw that she did not move and did not give a definite answer. They cheered enthusiastically. Gu Jinglian gave a rare smile. This was probably the first sincere smile he had given since he stepped into this room. "Close your eyes," he said. Chu Ho was reluctant at first, but Gu Jinglian's burning gaze fell on her face. She did not think too much and closed her eyes. Gu Jinglian lowered his head and gently covered her lips. This was the first time he had kissed her so gently. It was just a light touch, but it was more confusing than a passionate kiss. He kissed her slowly, but Chu Ho felt that her heart was beating faster and faster. She even felt like she was about to suffocate. The faster her heart beat, the more guilty she felt. It was as if her strong heartbeat would reach his ears. Gu Jinglian looked up and smiled at her. She thought that her heartbeat had been spied on by him, and she felt even more embarrassed. She had experienced life and death, and had also passed through the gates of hell. However, no matter how thrilling the experience was, it had never made her change her expression. But now, the color of her face changed again and again. In the end, it became the most beautiful color in Gu Jinglian's eyes. Gu Jinglian lifted her up. Chu Ho's blood immediately rushed to her head, and she did not know what was going on. She subconsciously lowered her head and buried her face in his chest. She only heard someone laughing and saying, "The bride is shy. The bride is so beautiful. But why is your face so red? Did you use too much blush?" When Chu Ho heard this, he lowered his head shyly. She did not even know how she got into the car. It was only when Gu Jinglian put her down in the back seat that she realized she was already in the wedding car. Gu Jinglian was surprised to see her blushing face. In his impression, Chu Ho was an extremely introverted person, but he was not a person who blushed easily. Perhaps it was because Gu Jinglian had always appeared cold and aloof, but he did not know that when she blushed, it was too much. However, he didn't say anything in front of outsiders. It was only after they got into the car that a certain man began to make fun of her. "Why is your face so red?" It would have been better if he hadn't mentioned it. Now that he mentioned it, Chu Ho felt even more uneasy. She raised her hand to touch her face and realized that her face was very hot. She immediately explained, "Oh, maybe it's too hot. The sun isn't very bright today. Why are you feeling hot?" Gu Jinglian glanced at her. "Are your clothes very thick?" She actually responded. How could Gu Jinglian not see that she was blushing because of shyness? She actually said that her blush was due to the heat in front of him. Therefore, he wanted to expose her hypocrisy, so he actually unbuttoned her clothes. Chapter 37:26. Chu Ho was shocked by the man's sudden action. She retreated and grabbed his wrist. She said angrily, "What are you doing? I think you're hot." Chu Ho was speechless. "I was just joking. You don't look like someone who would make a cold joke." Chu Ho was speechless again. She turned her head away angrily and did not look at him anymore. Gu Jinglian found it interesting. She actually had the delicate side of a little woman, but she was actually quite cute. The car ride was not far, but the journey took a long time. Perhaps because of the wedding, the two of them were sitting in the car now, but their identities were completely different. She was his wife, and he was her husband. Therefore, the change in their identities gave people a different feeling. She was a little uneasy, but Gu Jinglian was very calm and did not feel uneasy at all. It was said that during a wedding, men would be nervous, touched, surprised, and even cry. However, when it came to Gu Jinglian, he was calm and did not have any extra expression. He was too calm. Chu Ho was affected by him and gradually calmed down. The wedding was arranged in an orderly manner. Uncle Fu was very efficient. There was nothing to worry about. As he said, Chu Ho only needed to wear the wedding dress. Everything else had been arranged properly. Even the accident at the wedding had been predicted. The wedding car suddenly slowed down. The man sitting in the front passenger seat suddenly said in a low voice, "Master, Uncle Fu was right. The Meng family is chasing after us." The Meng family was also a big family in the capital. A few generations ago, they were also a rich and powerful family. However, in recent years, they had some conflicts with the Gu family in business. Most importantly, the Meng family's power was also a little dark. Therefore, when Gu Jinglian's wedding was held, the Meng family naturally wanted to take revenge on the Gu family and cause trouble. However, Uncle Fu was not as smart as he was. He had already predicted this and planned the route in advance. The roads in the capital were well connected. This was something that had already been planned in advance. Gu Jinglian said, "Follow the route and go around them." Understood. After the car passed a traffic light, it sped towards another road. There were many policemen on the road near the center, so it was naturally difficult to do anything. If it was a small road, it would be a different story. Gu Jinglian naturally did not want these things to happen. After all, it was their wedding day, and no one wanted to be unlucky. However, Gu Jinglian was not so easy to deal with when the unlucky person came knocking on his door. However, one day, Gu Jinglian instructed his subordinates in advance that it was okay to fight, but not to draw blood. At most, they would break a few bones, but there was no need to draw blood. Regardless of whether it was his own blood or the enemy's blood, he should not see it. However, it could also be foreseen that the Meng family would definitely bring weapons when they came. However, the people from the Gu family weren't weak either. Not to mention bringing knives, even if they brought guns, they wouldn't be able to cause any bloodshed. The convoy drove to another road, and there was no one around. The people from the Meng family also became arrogant. They rushed over without restraint and directly stopped the Gu family's convoy. The car stopped. Gu Jinglian said to Chu Ho, "Stay in the car. Don't move." Chu Ho also appeared very calm. Uncle Fu had also told her about this so that she wouldn't make a fuss if something unexpected happened. Chapter 37:27. However, Chu Ho did not think much of it. With Gu Jinglian's identity and background, it was inevitable that something like this would happen. The people from the Meng family got out of the car and started cursing. Some of them were holding iron rods, while others were holding machetes. It was obvious that they were going to fight to the death. Gu Jinglian scoffed. He had never taken a small character like the Meng family seriously. What era was it now? They were still behaving like third-rate hooligans. The people from the Gu family also got out of the car. The people who were hiding by the roadside also surrounded them. As soon as Gu Jinglian pushed open the door, the people from the Meng family saw him and swarmed toward him dauntlessly. Two people broke through the encirclement. They raised the iron rods in their hands and waved them at him. Gu Jinglian did not even look at him. He did not even raise his hand, which was in his trousers. He raised his leg and kicked the man to the ground. He turned around and kicked the other man's calf. The other man knelt on the ground on the spot and could no longer stand up. It turned out that this kick had broken his knee. Gu Jinglian rarely had the chance to show his skills. However, this did not mean that he could not deal with it when he encountered an accident. In other words, the best fighter in the Gu family was standing in front of him. He still had to think carefully about how to deal with him. Such a small role was not worth watching. Chu Ho sat in the car, but he was a little nervous. Through the window, he saw Gu Jinglian's figure disappear into the crowd. He did not know where he was. There was fighting outside, and the roars were intense. People kept flying out of the crowd. They were really flying. They lay on the ground and wailed. Some could get up, while others twitched and struggled on the ground. They could not get up no matter what. However, the people from the Gu family were ruthless. They were ruthless, but there was not a single drop of blood. Today was Master Gu's big day. No blood could be seen. It was bad luck. Even though many people from the Meng family came with knives, there was no blood. Just as Chu Ho was feeling nervous, he caught a glimpse of a barebacked man with a tattoo of Guan Yu on his back. He was sneaking toward the wedding car. He deliberately avoided the eyes of the Gu family. Plus, he was not very strong, so it was easy for people to overlook him. Chu Ho raised his eyebrows in confusion. Was this man here to kidnap her? Seeing that she was sitting in the car, he wanted to do something to her? Chu Ho smiled and leaned against the car door. When the driver saw this, before he could stop him, Chu Ho immediately unlocked the car and opened the door. This saved the man from smashing the car window and door with a stick. Chu Ho got out of the car in a bright red gown. The man was stunned. How could a woman be so daring? He had only seen her cowering in a corner, but he had never thought that she would be so brazen as to face him head-on. The man grinned. "You're very brave, aren't you?" Chu Ho asked. "What do you want?" "What?" The man smirked. "F*CKU. Can you do it?" "Sure." Chu Ho's expression was very cold. He added, "If you have the ability." When the man heard this, he found it even more interesting. He laughed and rushed toward her. He waved the metal rod in his hand toward her forehead. Chu Ho dodged nimbly. She turned sideways and raised her hand. She grabbed the man's wrist tightly and twisted it. The man screamed and the metal rod in his hand fell to the ground with a clang. Chapter 37:28. As Chu Ho said this, she sneered and grabbed the man's neck. She pressed him against the wall, clenched her fist, and punched his lower abdomen. The man originally thought that she was at most a showy fighter, But who would have thought that this woman was not just a showy fighter, but a real fighter? If this punch landed on his nose bridge would break into 3 pieces. Ah! The man grimaced in pain and stared at her in shock. Chu Ho also knew that she could not afford to see blood today. Otherwise, she would have punched him in the face. Get lost if you don't want to die. He threw him to the side. The man fell to the ground, but immediately got up. If you're so capable, why don't you kill me today? The man looked like a ruffian from the lowest rung of the Hay Society. He was obviously trying to disgust Chu Ho on purpose. He knew that today was her wedding day and that no blood should be spilled, but he still wanted to disgust her. If you're so capable, why don't you kill me? Today is your wedding day. If you spill some blood, I won't die in vain. When Chu Ho heard this, she smiled and walked up to him. She grabbed him by the collar and said meaningfully, "If there's no blood, I can make you wish you were dead." In the past, when she was in the mercenary corps, she had seen and suffered torture without blood. If there was no blood, she could make him wish he was dead. When Gu Jinglian returned to the car after dealing with the small fries, he saw a person lying on the ground. However, although he could tell that it was a person, he did not look human anymore. His limbs were bent at an extremely twisted angle and there were many fractures, especially below the knee, which was bent at a 90-degree angle. It was horrifying. Just by looking at the tattoos on his body, he could tell that this was a fighter from the Meng family. On the other hand, Chu Ho was still sitting in the car in a dignified manner, as if she was still a beautiful and reserved bride. What happened? The chauffeur lowered the car window and said softly, "Master? Master Gu, what's going on?" Gu Jinglian stepped on the chest of the man on the ground and pressed down lightly. The man suddenly opened his eyes and gasped in pain, but he could not scream. He was still alive. His frown deepened as he guessed who was behind this. His attack was ruthless, but he had a good grasp of the situation. One could imagine how painful it must have been for this person to have all 4 of his limbs broken. However, not a drop of blood could be seen, and he was still alive. It must be Chu Ho's doing. However, who asked this man to come to him so eagerly? He thought that the bride was easy to bully and could be bullied by anyone. He thought that if Gu Jinglian was not around, he could take advantage of the situation. He was thinking too much. Although Chu Ho's skills were below his, he was not weak. Just how suicidal was this person to send himself to death? The driver still had lingering fears. At first, he was worried that Chu Ho was in danger, but when he saw Chu Ho's skills, he was terrified. What terrifying strength! She was indeed Master Gu's wife. Her strength was comparable to Master Gu's. On the scene, more than half of the Meng family's people were on the ground. Those who were left were the new members of the Meng family. Now, more people from the Gu family had arrived at the scene. Seeing that they had the advantage in numbers, it was difficult to resist. However, due to the Meng family's orders, they did not dare to advance or retreat. Chapter 3729. They had all come to the capital from different places in order to earn a living. The Meng family had taken them in and taken the money, so they had to work for them. However, even if they had taken the money, they couldn't risk their lives, right? Hence, they hesitated and froze. No one dared to step forward or back away. After the Gu family members had boarded the motorcade, a portion of them stayed behind to guard the scene. The motorcade then looked at the Gu residents. The Meng family members were dumbfounded. Who would have thought that the Gu family members would be so fierce? They had not come here with the intention of arm wrestling with the Gu family. They just wanted to take the Gu family's joy away on such a joyous occasion. The Meng family originally wanted to catch the Gu family off guard. However, they did not expect Uncle Fu to be so experienced and foresee things. He had already taken this matter into account. So much so that he had calculated how they would travel and how much time they would waste. Even the timing of the motorcade's arrival at the Gu residence was extremely accurate. At the entrance of the Gu residence, the motorcade stopped in an orderly manner and formed a long line. At the entrance, the Gu family members stood in 2 rows and were fully armed. Most of the guests that Gu Jinglian had invited this time were of high status. Hence, to prevent unnecessary accidents, the security was very adequate. Uncle Fu and Aunt Qin stood at the entrance and greeted the guests. The guests gathered at the entrance. The best man opened the door for Gu Jinglian and got out of the car. The man went around to the other side of the car and opened the door. He stretched out his strong arms and carried Chu Ho out of the car. Fireworks shot up into the sky. The colorful fireworks fell on them. Chu Ho was shocked by the sudden sound of the fireworks. She could not help but shrink into his arms. This inadvertent dependence was obvious. Gu Jinglian laughed and said playfully, "When I saw you fighting earlier, you weren't so timid." "You're still talking about it?" Chu Ho said angrily, "Why did this happen today? It's fine if there's no blood, but when there's blood I feel unlucky." When Gu Jinglian heard this, his eyes turned cold. "After the wedding, I will settle the score with the Meng family." After a pause, Gu Jinglian smiled and changed the topic. "However, since today is our wedding, you don't have to think too much. Leave everything to me." "Hand it to you?" "Fortunately, I didn't give it to you. However, fortunately I have some skills. It won't be a problem to have a few more of those shrimp soldiers and crab generals." As Chu Ho spoke, he raised his head, his eyes filled with pride. In that case, Gu Jinglian should quickly go along with her thoughts and praise her. "A woman who is worthy of me, Gu Jinglian, is naturally not an ordinary person." Chu Ho could not help but laugh. "Are you praising me or yourself? You won't lose out if you praise me." Gu Jinglian lowered his eyes and stared into her eyes. "Only a man like me is worthy of you." Chu Ho was amused by him, but she pursed her lips and held back her laughter. "Speaking of which, aren't you tired of carrying me like this?" From the entrance to the wedding room, they had to walk through several winding corridors like this. They had to pass through 3 courtyards, all of which were landscaped courtyards. She was very thin, but with her height, she definitely wasn't light. An ordinary man would be panting from exhaustion after carrying her for a while. Chapter 3730. For Gu Jinglian, Chu Ho was considered relatively light. His arm strength was definitely not trained for nothing. When he was young, his hands and feet were tied to 10 kilograms of iron. He persevered and ran with weights to train his physical strength. "Is it heavy?" Gu Jinglian did not answer but asked instead, "Do you think it's heavy?" Chu Ho blushed and said, "I don't think it's heavy. I don't usually eat much, so I'm not considered fat." "It's heavy." Gu Jinglian said, "I'm carrying the whole world. Do you think it's heavy?" Chu Ho widened her eyes in surprise. It was normal for couples to speak sweet nothings. However, when such affectionate words came out of the mouth of a man like Gu Jinglian, it was a little unusual. In her eyes, Gu Jinglian was a more old-fashioned man. He was obviously still very young, but he gave people a feeling that he had been through a lot. When he always spoke in a commanding tone. He was very strict and serious. He had always been a man who did not smile. He was a man who would not even laugh when he was joking. When he joked, he was a man who did not even know how to joke. Now, he had blurted out such sweet words of love. Chu Ho really could not imagine that these words came out of Gu Jinglian's mouth. "What's wrong?" Gu Jinglian saw that she was stunned and did not think much of it. "What's with your expression?" "I can't tell." Chu Ho sighed and said, "You're quite good at saying sweet nothings. If you want to hear it, I'll say it to you in the future." As Gu Jinglian said this, he added, "The premise is that I'm in a good mood." "Wasn't that the same as not saying anything?" Chu Ho asked in return, "When have you ever been in a good mood?" She saw that he always had a serious face, as if the whole world owed him money. She always felt that he had never been in a good mood. "Of course." Gu Jinglian snorted coldly. "For example, today, I'm in a good mood." This was the truth. Ever since he woke up in the morning, his mood had become very light. Even if he encountered people like the Meng family who came to pick a fight, it did not dampen his mood at all. Chu Ho's heart was shaken by something, and he trembled slightly. Today, her understanding of Gu Jinglian was about to break through the limit. She didn't expect that this man could tell cold jokes, say romantic words, and even say words that could move people. He didn't know if Uncle Fu had taught him how to say these words, or if he had thought of them himself. However, no matter what, even if he already had a draft for these words, It was already not easy for him to swallow his pride and say these words. Although she was not particular about romance, it was already very surprising to hear such words of love coming out of his mouth on such a day. Hugging the entire world, Chu-ho kept recalling this sentence in her mind. She wanted to laugh, but because he was here, she didn't dare to laugh so easily. She didn't want him to think that she was laughing at him. Hence, she secretly covered her mouth and held the apple in her hand to the side of her mouth. The corners of her lips curled up uncontrollably. The apple in her hand was given to her by Mama Fu before they left. Mama Fu said that hugging an apple in her hand would ensure the safety of the two of them for the rest of their lives. This was a moral and also a tradition. Chapter 37-31. Gu Jinglian carried him into the bridal chamber. There was already a group of people gathered at the entrance of the bridal chamber. When they saw Gu Jinglian carrying Chu-ho in, they held up colorful confetti in their hands and sprinkled them over their heads. Chu-ho buried her face in Gu Jinglian's chest. Gu Jinglian also instinctively shielded her to prevent the confetti from falling into her eyes. When the two of them entered the room, Gu Jinglian carried Chu-ho and sat her down on the bed. The bed had already been made the night before. The red embroidered bedsheet and quilt cover, as well as the white quilt on top of it, were stuffed with dates, peanuts, longans, and lotus seeds. The quilt was pieced together to form the words, "Give birth to a child soon." Chu-ho glanced at it and her face instantly turned red. She instinctively stroked her lower abdomen, thinking that this child and daughter had already been in her stomach for a long time. According to tradition, when these quilts were laid out, an underage child would be invited to crawl on them. It had a special meaning of joy. Hence, this heavy responsibility fell on Xiaobao and Lin Shi's shoulders. At night, Uncle Fu carried Xiaobao and Lin Shi to the bed. They rolled and crawled on the bed. Uncle Fu watched from the side and chuckled. He was extremely happy. However, Xiaobao did not know the purpose of this. He pestered Uncle Fu and asked him why they had to crawl on the bed. Uncle Fu said, "This is a tradition. You'll know when you grow up." However, Xiaobao was angry. It seemed like it would take a long time for him to grow up. Wouldn't he have to wait for a long time to find out? While Gu Jinglian and Chu-ho were sitting, Lin Shi walked over with a pair of red scissors and a small red bag in his hands. He walked in front of Gu Jinglian and Chu-ho, smiled shyly and said softly, "Dad, Mom, don't move." Chu-ho didn't know what he was going to do, but he was obedient and sat still. Lin Shi carefully cut a few strands of hair from her head. He cut them very carefully. He was worried that he would prick her skin, but he was also worried that he would mess up her hair. He cut a strand of hair and walked over to Gu Jinglian. He cut another strand of hair from his temples. Gu Jinglian's hair was naturally not as long as Chu-ho's, but it was not very short either. Lin Shi carefully twisted the two strands of hair together and gently placed them into the red fortune pouch. This meant that the two of them were officially husband and wife. Lin Shi smiled and said a few words of joy. "I wish you a happy and blissful marriage. I wish you a child soon. I wish you a happy and loving life." Chu-ho smiled, took his hand, and asked curiously, "Who taught you that?" "Uncle Fu taught me that." Initially, Uncle Fu wanted to let Xiaobao do it, but he was worried that Xiaobao didn't know how to use scissors and couldn't cut it well. Moreover, he couldn't recite these lines well even after repeating them a few times. So, Uncle Fu let me do it. Pfft. Chu-ho laughed out loud. Everyone behind him also laughed kindly. Lin Shi felt very happy. In his eyes, these things were extremely sacred. However, Xiaobao felt wronged. He couldn't recite these lines. On one hand, he wasn't good at reciting and couldn't even pronounce the words correctly. He didn't know what "have a child soon" meant. He also didn't know what a happy and blissful marriage meant. On the other hand, he was extremely nervous. Hence, Lin Shi snatched the spot. Chapter 37-32. Uncle Fu brought over 2 bowls of soup. There were glutinous rice balls, yuan shao, dates, and lotus hearts. The soup was sweet and meant sweetness and harmony. However, they had to feed each other a mouthful of the soup first. Gu Jinglian was naturally the first to be fed. It was his first time eating sweet soup and he didn't really like sweet things. Hence, as he fiddled with the food in the bowl, he asked, What do you want to eat? I'll eat glutinous rice balls. Okay. It was rare for Gu Jinglian to be so docile. The reason why he was described as docile was because Gu Jinglian had always been arrogant and unruly. He rarely took the initiative to feed others and would even ask for their opinion on what they wanted to eat. How rare! Chu Ho was naturally happy to see this and enjoyed being fed. After feeding him 2 mouthfuls, Gu Jinglian said unhappily, "This bowl is almost finished. When are you going to feed me?" Chu Ho was stunned. He hadn't swallowed the glutinous rice ball in his mouth and asked incoherently, "Huh? Do I have to feed you too?" Otherwise? Gu Jinglian raised his eyebrows. "Do you want to eat both bowls?" "I don't have that intention." "Then why aren't you feeding me?" That domineering Gu Jinglian seemed to have returned. Chu Ho didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but he immediately swallowed the glutinous rice ball in his mouth and scooped another glutinous rice ball to bring to his mouth. Gu Jinglian glanced at it, but his gaze was cold as if he didn't care about it. He didn't like glutinous rice balls? Chu Ho raised his eyebrows strangely and fed him another glutinous rice ball. Gu Jinglian still didn't open his mouth. Chu Ho couldn't sit still anymore and asked impatiently, "What do you want to eat?" Gu Jinglian smiled wickedly and leaned closer to her. He said slowly, "I want to eat what you feed me with your mouth." "You?" Chu Ho's face immediately turned red. Even though Gu Jinglian deliberately lowered his voice, Uncle Fu, who was beside him, heard him. He raised his head and said to the people in the room, "Mr. Gu wants to eat the bride, so he fed her with her mouth." "Aya, bride, please satisfy the groom and feed him with your mouth." "Exactly." The cameraman also walked over with his camera and pointed it at them. He smiled and said, "Bride, don't be too shy. Use your mouth to feed the groom. It's a good opportunity for me to capture this scene." Chu Ho pursed her lips reluctantly. Gu Jinglian was obviously trying to prank her. Gu Jinglian, on the other hand, looked at her calmly and did not rush her. It was only when she slowly held the spoon that he said, "I want to eat glutinous rice balls." Tang Yuan was so soft and sticky. It was really not easy to bite it off. This man must be doing it on purpose. However, Chu Ho couldn't flare up in front of so many people. She could only take a bite of the glutinous rice ball. Gu Jinglian's face came closer. His thin lips opened slightly and he bit the glutinous rice ball in her mouth. The soft glutinous rice ball was squashed. It was sticky, soft, and sticky with the sticky sweet soup and the rich sesame core. Chu Ho bit the glutinous rice ball and didn't move. Gu Jinglian, on the other hand, was more active. He bit the glutinous rice ball and gently sucked the soup that was about to escape from the corner of his mouth. The tip of his tongue gently stroked and finally bit the soft glutinous rice ball into 2 pieces. The sticky glutinous rice ball skin pulled white threads between their lips and teeth. Chapter 37-33. Gu Jinglian bit into the glutinous rice ball and smiled mischievously. He then hugged the back of Chu Ho's neck and kissed her, slowly wiping away the leftover soup on her lips. Of course, other than Uncle Fu, the guests and others who were crowded in the room to watch were tortured by this bowl of public display of affection. After finishing the 2 bowls of sweet soup, Uncle Fu urged Chu Ho to touch up her makeup while Gu Jinglian went to the door to welcome the guests. Gu Jinglian actually did not want to welcome the guests as he felt quite uncomfortable standing at the door. However, Uncle Fu insisted that this was a tradition, so how could they not follow it? Hence, Gu Jinglian and a few groomsmen stood at the entrance of the Gu residence and braced themselves to welcome the guests. Not long after, Chu Ho came over and happened to meet Meng Qingxue and Mu Yanqing. Meng Qingxue saw Chu Ho standing at the door in a fiery red dragon and phoenix gown, looking especially dazzling. She exclaimed as she walked over and held Chu Ho's hand. She exclaimed, "Chu Ho, you're so beautiful today. You're probably the most beautiful bride I've ever seen." Chu Ho smiled. "Thank you." She saw that Meng Qingxue had only brought Mu Yanqing with her. Mu Yanqing was wearing a suit and it was obvious that he had dressed up meticulously. His hair was also combed very handsomely. Mu Yanqing smiled at her and said, "Congratulations." Mu Yanqing did not dare to look Gu Jinglian in the eye. However, Gu Jinglian said in a rare amiable manner, "Welcome." Chu Ho asked, "Why don't I see the little guy?" "The little guy caught a cold a while ago. Otherwise, I would definitely bring him over." Meng Qingxue continued, "Chu Ho, congratulations. I wish you a blissful marriage and a child soon." Thank you." After saying that, Meng Qingxue held Mu Yanqing's arm and stepped through the door. Uncle Fu led the way. Mu Yanqing also passed the monetary gift he had prepared in advance to Uncle Fu. Uncle Fu happily accepted it. It was packed in a large red envelope. Uncle Fu was very experienced. With just a touch, he knew that there was 100,000 yuan inside. Mu Yanqing was even more generous with 100,000 yuan. Actually, Meng Qingxue and Chu Ho did not interact much. They kept in touch through phone calls and text messages, but Chu Ho had taken care of Meng Qingxue in the past, so Mu Yanqing was naturally grateful to him. Hence, this monetary gift had to be presentable, and it was also for her sake. Gu Jinglian and Chu Ho stood at the entrance to welcome the guests. They stood there for an hour. Not long after, 2 Bentleys stopped at the entrance. Gu Jinglian glanced at them and saw that it was Mu Yazhe and Yun Shishir who got out of the car. Yun Shishir carried Yueyao from the back seat. The driver of the car behind opened the door for Yu, Xiao Yichen, and Lisa to alight. It was a family of six people in a grandiose manner. Gu Jinglian's expression changed when he saw this. Mu Yazhe was the most ostentatious and had attracted the most people. Gu Jinglian's gaze fell on Lisa. Seeing that she was also here, he guessed that Lisa must have settled down at the Mu residence. However, compared to Meng Qingxue and Mu Yanqing's amiability, when Mu Yazhe led the family of 6 to him, Gu Jinglian saw Yu's arrogant expression. Clearly, he was disdainful of him. Gu Jinglian's eyes turned slightly cold. This fellow, he had not even settled the score with him for the North Africa incident, yet he was already showing such an infuriating expression. Chapter 37-34. Yu had an arrogant look on his face, as if attending Gu Jinglian's wedding was beneath him. Everyone was silent. Gu Jinglian almost blurted out, "Get lost." Fortunately, Uncle Fu was good at reading people's expressions. He quickly stopped him and muttered softly, "Old master, it's a big day. Don't get angry." Mu Yazhe tried not to laugh. His son was too arrogant. Even if it was Gu Jinglian, he didn't intend to show him much respect. He was too fierce. Yun Shishir didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Chu Ho couldn't help but burst out laughing. Xiao Yichen, on the other hand, tugged at Yu's sleeve nervously. "Hey, Yu, at least say, congratulations." After all, Gu Jinglian was his and Lisa's savior. Hence, Xiao Yichen had a good impression of Gu Jinglian. However, Yu didn't like Gu Jinglian and looked at him with contempt. Gu Jinglian didn't get along with him either. The 2 of them, 1 adult and 1 child, looked at each other with great hostility. Yun Shishir quickly stepped forward and said to Gu Jinglian and Chu Ho, "Jinglian, Chu Ho, congratulations. Congratulations on your marriage, and may you live a long and happy life together." Gu Jinglian snorted, but his expression didn't look too bad. Obviously, Yun Shishir's timely consolation had more or less calmed his anger. Chu Ho couldn't help but say, "This little guy is too cute." He was practically made from the same mold as Gu Jinglian. Why were their temperaments so similar? They were arrogant, aloof, and looked down on everyone. One was a big devil and the other was a little devil. No wonder they didn't get along. Yun Shishir was also somewhat helpless. How would she know that there was a conflict between Yu and Gu Jinglian? When they were in North Africa, the 2 of them had a huge conflict. Yu caused Gu Jinglian to lose a piece of land, and Yu obviously did not take the arrogant Gu Jinglian seriously. It was only natural that the 2 of them would not get along. Mu Yazhe stepped forward and said to Gu Jinglian, "Congratulations on your marriage. This is just a small gift from me. I hope you'll accept it." He handed over a red packet. The red packet was long and big, but it was very flat. Gu Jinglian immediately knew that this red packet must be very valuable. Mu Yazhe couldn't have stuffed a $100 bill into the bag. It must have been a large check. "Uncle Fu." Gu Jinglian greeted him. Uncle Fu immediately walked over and took the red packet from Mu Yazhe. He smiled and bowed. President Mu, Mrs. Mu, this way please. Mu Yaja nodded. He held onto Yun Shirshir's arm and the six of them stepped into the Mu residence under Uncle Fu's lead. Chu Ho saw that they had entered the residence and there was no one at the door. She bent down and gently massaged the sore muscles in her calves. She was wearing high heels, but she didn't usually wear high heels. In addition, she was standing at the door motionlessly in high heels. Her calf muscles were tense, and it was inevitable that she would feel a little sore. When Auntie Chin saw this, she immediately said, "High heels must be uncomfortable, right?" Chu Ho nodded. "Yeah, it's against my feet. My toes hurt too." "Okay, wait for me for a while. I'll get you a pair of flats." Auntie Fu asked, "Do you have flats with red flats?" "Yes, but they're cloth shoes. They're also red, so it's okay to wear them." Chu Ho is pregnant. She can't wear high heels all the time. It's not good for her health. "Yeah, you're right. Hurry up and change them." Chapter 37-35. This was because it was a traditional Chinese wedding. Therefore, there was also a ceremony to worship heaven and earth. After all the guests had arrived, Gu Jinglian and Chu Ho followed the tradition and worshipped heaven and earth. Then, the ceremony was considered complete. It was the first time that Chu Ho had experienced such a traditional wedding. She found it very novel. However, this wedding had a special meaning to Gu Jinglian. He had never thought that he would marry and have children in this life. Even more so, he had never thought that his wife would be Chu Ho. She was once an Interpol officer, and he was a name on the Interpol blacklist. Two names that would never have crossed each other's paths in their lives were now linked together. On this day, Gu Jinglian appeared to be very happy. Together with Uncle Fu, he did not refuse any of the guests' toasts and drank some wine. When everyone cheered for him to kiss the bride, Gu Jinglian did not pull a long face. Instead, he generously put his arm around Chu Ho's waist and gently kissed her red lips. No matter what, he refused to do it. Chu Ho also felt that with Gu Jinglian's style, he would definitely not show off his love in front of everyone. Such an ascetic man would definitely be a different person in private. However, in front of so many people, he would definitely not let them off too easily. Some people cheered and urged them to disturb the bridal chamber. Gu Jinglian's expression immediately darkened. Although he did not say anything, his attitude was clear. If they dared to disturb the bridal chamber, they would try it. Of course, everyone was just talking. If they really wanted to disturb Gu Jinglian's bridal chamber, they would not dare to do it even if they had 10 times the courage. After the banquet, the guests left one by one. At night, Gu Jinglian dealt with all the situations. When he entered the room, Chu Ho was sitting on the big bed in a bright red wedding dress. She was holding 2 dolls in her arms. These 2 dolls were handmade by Uncle Fu and were placed on the bed. One was a girl doll and the other was a boy doll. It meant that they had both a son and a daughter. The girl held the word Bai Nian in her hands, while the boy held the word Hao Feng in his arms. When put together, it meant Hao Feng. In addition, Chu Ho was carrying a pair of twins, a boy and a girl. This pair of babies was especially suitable for the occasion. When Chu Ho saw it, he couldn't bear to part with it and kept holding it in his arms. Meng Qingxue was also there. She held Xiao Bao in her arms and chatted with her. When she saw Gu Jinglian, she stood up with a smile and said, "Ah, the groom is here. It's time for me to leave and not disturb your wedding night." Xiao Bao was originally reluctant to leave, but Meng Qingxue quietly whispered a few words into his ear. When Xiao Bao heard this, he instantly beamed with joy and obediently followed her. After the two of them left, Meng Qingxue did not forget to close the door. Gu Jinglian turned around and looked at Chu Ho. For some reason, she could still act gracefully in front of the guests. Now that there was no one else in the room except for them, he seemed a little uneasy. Have the guests all left? Gu Jinglian hummed in acknowledgement and walked over to sit beside her. He was wearing a suit. Because it was a Chinese wedding, the suit had Chinese elements. There was gold embroidery on the collar and sleeves. The buttons were also carved with dragons and phoenixes. Under the lights, the whole room was a sea of red. Chapter 37-36. Red curtains, red window panes, red sheets and quilts, Even her body was covered in a bright red color, giving her an ancient charm. Chu Ho nervously intertwined her hands together. For a moment, she did not know what to say. Gu Jinglian tugged at his tie slightly. Perhaps it was because he had drunk alcohol, but his body was a little warm. This feeling, this scene, this wedding night. The ancients said that every moment of the night was worth 1,000 gold. However, if it were them, Gu Jinglian would probably suffer a little. She was now pregnant with a pair of twins. Because it was still early pregnancy, it was best to avoid sex as much as possible. Uncle Fu had also repeatedly reminded Gu Jinglian that they could not do it on the wedding night, lest it affected the babies. Gu Jinglian was naturally very cautious about the children. Therefore, even if he was in such an environment, it made him have some thoughts about her. However, because of the two little guys in her stomach, no matter how many thoughts he had, he could only ruthlessly strangle them to extinction. Chu Ho saw that his breathing was a little heavy, but she did not know that it was because he had drunk alcohol. She thought that he was suppressing it, so she said with a red face, "Mother Blessing said that when you're pregnant, you should avoid sex as much as possible. I'm afraid you can't do that today." She said it more ambiguously. When Gu Jinglian heard this, he turned his face and looked at her deeply, but he asked knowingly, "Which one?" She played dumb. "Which one are you talking about?" Chu Ho said a little angrily, "Why are you still asking when you know?" "I don't know." Gu Jinglian's ability to play dumb was not much worse than hers. "If you don't say it, how would I know?" At this moment, his gaze fell on her face. His handsome eyes were so deep and ambiguous that it was so rich that it was about to overflow. Chu Ho only felt her face burning under his stare. "Gu Jinglian, don't ask when you know the answer." Gu Jinglian, however, brushed it off completely. "I really don't know." Chu Ho snorted disapprovingly. He turned his face away awkwardly and said, "It means that we can't have sex." Gu Jinglian said, "Oh," but the last syllable was dragged out. He suddenly moved closer and pinched her chin, forcing her to face him. "From your tone, it sounds like you're very regretful?" Chu Ho's face instantly turned red. "What do you mean I'm sorry?" Gu Jinglian smiled. When he smiled, the corners of his lips curved into a faint arc. It was extremely charming. He was obviously making fun of her. Literally. "I know you understand." Chu Ho smiled and said, "I wonder who's the regretful one? On the wedding night, you can only hug each other and can't consummate your marriage. You should be the one suffering more." "Who said that I can only hug each other?" Gu Jinglian suddenly leaned over and pressed his body weight onto hers. However, Gu Jinglian was especially careful. Although he was leaning on her, he did not press all of his weight on her. She couldn't bear the sudden weight and was pinned down by him. Looking up, Chu Ho met Gu Jinglian's deep eyes. It was as if there was magic in his eyes. It was like an endless abyss that wanted to hook her soul into it. Chu Ho was pinned down and couldn't move. She twisted around uncomfortably. Chapter 37:37. "You," Gu Jinglian immediately said, "Shoo, don't talk." Chu Ho was a little puzzled. She did not understand what he was trying to do. Although she was pinned under his body, Gu Jinglian's arms held on tightly. Although he was suppressing her, he did not put all his weight on her body. Gu Jinglian looked at her like this. His rare gentle gaze swept across her face inch by inch. In his mind, it was like a revolving lantern. Memories appeared one after another. From the first time they met, she stood in front of him, arrogant and respectful. She was as cold as a machine, as if there was no emotion or warmth. At that time, Gu Jinglian could tell that this woman was not an ordinary person. Later, he slowly realized that she was an undercover agent sent by Interpol. She lurked around him in order to collect evidence and take action. However, he was not in a hurry to expose her. He had given her a chance. If she had given up her identity as an undercover agent, he would definitely not have killed her. Logically speaking, such a woman betrayed and deceived him. Given his personality, he would definitely kill her. However, he did not know why he felt compassion. However, Chu Ho did not give up her duty as an Interpol agent. Hence, he made a move. At that time, he was cold and decisive. He did not leave any way out. However, he did not expect that she did not die and was even pregnant. It was his child. Their reunion 5 years later was unexpected, but also expected. He did not expect that their child was already 5 years old. His name was Xiao Bao. When Gu Jinglian heard this name, he did not know whether to laugh or cry. This name sounded a little old-fashioned. However, he had already gotten used to calling her by that name. Later, Chu Ho came to North Africa to look for him. She braved the rain of bullets and came to him alone in such a dangerous war zone. Gu Jinglian did not expect her to come. When he saw her, he was still a little puzzled. He thought that if he died in North Africa, Chu Ho would definitely feel relieved and leave the Gu family with Xiao Bao. He did not expect that she would come to North Africa to look for him. Along the way from North Africa, the two of them had experienced life and death situations and passed through many difficulties and obstacles. At that time, when they boarded the ship back to the capital, Gu Jinglian had already decided on her. He had set his mind on this woman. Gu Jinglian looked at her fixedly. Chu Ho asked him uneasily, "What's wrong? You keep staring at me." However, in the next second, Gu Jinglian's thin lips gently covered hers. He gently pried open her soft lips and drove straight in. This was the first time in his life that he had taken the initiative to kiss her so gently. At first, Chu Ho was frozen by such a sudden kiss and did not dare to move. However, she gradually got used to this kind of kiss and knew how to respond to him slowly. When they kissed, the chemistry between the two of them was unparalleled. Feeling her response, Gu Jinglian kissed her even more deeply. He took her hand and guided her to hug him. Chu Ho smiled, closed her eyes, and hugged his shoulders obediently. The kiss deepened. Gu Jinglian turned around and pulled her onto his body. He hugged the back of her neck. A few strands of Chu Ho's black hair suddenly fell and covered his eyes. The room was brightly lit. Chapter 37-38. After they got married, they did not have the time to be sweet. Moreover, with Gu Jinglian's personality, even if he wanted to be sweet, he would not be able to be sweet. Therefore, she naturally entered a difficult pregnancy. During the early stages of pregnancy, Chu Ho began to have pregnancy symptoms. In fact, her physical fitness was considered good, so the pregnancy symptoms were not very serious. Other than feeling nauseous every morning and not being able to see greasy things, the most strange thing was that, like most pregnant women, she had an inexplicable preference for sour and sweet things. Uncle Fu bought some sour plums and candied plums and put them on the bedside table. When Chu Ho was hungry, she would take 1 or 2 of them out to eat. This was because she did not know if she could eat more of these sour plums. She heard that if she ate too much sweet food during pregnancy, it was easy to get diabetes. Therefore, she did not dare to eat too much sweet things. When she was hungry, she would eat a few to satisfy her cravings. After that, she would not eat more. However, Xiao Bao and Lin, she would sometimes sneak into her room to look for some snacks. They did not know why Uncle Fu prepared so many candied plums and sour plums. They thought that Chu Ho had hidden the snacks and did not want to let them eat them. Therefore, they would steal a can every time. When Uncle Fu saw this, he also guessed who the culprit was. However, he just smiled and pretended not to know. He replenished the stock again. When Chu Ho's pregnancy symptoms were at their worst, she did not eat much for 2 whole days. It was not that she did not eat. Chu Ho's tolerance was amazing. Even if the food was not to her appetite and she felt nauseous when she saw it, she endured it and ate it. However, before she could digest it, she vomited it all out. Sometimes, he would even vomit out bile. After a week, she had lost a lot of weight. It was really not easy to be pregnant. This was Gu Jinglian's only sigh. In addition, she was pregnant with 2 little guys. Therefore, her belly looked obviously bigger than other pregnant women's. Other pregnant women's bellies were more than 4 months old, but she was already so big at 3 months. However, even though he was pregnant, Chu Ho still insisted on exercising. When he woke up in the morning, after washing his face and brushing his teeth, he insisted on taking a walk in the backyard. After eating, he walked around as much as he could. In the evening, Gu Jinglian came back. He never took a walk, but ever since Chu Ho got pregnant, he became patient and insisted on holding her hand to take a walk. Gradually, the number of people taking a stroll increased. Uncle Fu would also tag along. Mama Qin was worried that Chu Ho would feel unwell and vomit halfway through the stroll, so she also tagged along eagerly. Xiao Bao and Lin Shi were also worried, so every time after dinner, the group would take a stroll in the back garden. Although Chu Ho's pregnancy was not serious, it lasted for a long time. During that time, she could not eat anything. Uncle Fu and Mama Qin went back and forth on the food. It could be said that they had deliberately and racked their brains. They even specially hired a nutritionist to come back and customize a special diet for her. In the end, Chu Ho did not have an appetite. Other than porridge, she would vomit everything that had a little oil on it. It was better not to eat it. Otherwise, she would not be able to withstand vomiting like this every day. Chapter 37-39. At the very least, Chu Ho would not have any extreme reactions after eating these. However, what surprised Mother Qin the most was that even after she was pregnant, Chu Ho's mood remained very good. It was said that during pregnancy, especially in the middle, pregnant women would often lose control of their emotions and become very irritable. Sometimes, they would lose their temper for no reason. However, Chu Ho would not. His mood was so stable that it made one's hair stand on end. He still looked calm and composed, no different from usual. On the other hand, Gu Jinglian's temper changed a lot. In front of Chu Ho, no matter how bad his mood was, he would not show any negative emotions. However, when it came to other people, his temper was worse than before. Especially every time Chu Ho vomited everything he had just eaten, he would find Mother Qin and vent his anger, blaming her for not preparing the food well. As a result, Gu Jinglian was especially irritable when he saw Chu Ho suffer. He had never been good at expressing his feelings in front of Chu Ho. Everyone could tell that he was just worried about Chu Ho. Chu Ho once found out about it and felt very apologetic. Whether he vomited or not really had much to do with the food Mother Qin prepared. He instinctively rejected it, even if it was just a little bit of greasy meat. Perhaps he would feel better after this period of time. Chu Ho looked for Mother Qin guiltily and apologized to her. However, Mother Qin laughed. I was wondering what was going on. You even specially looked for me. Sigh, it's nothing. Old Master's temper is much better than before. In the past, he always had a bad temper. Did he get angry often? It would be better if he got angry often. At least, he wouldn't keep it to himself. It would be easier to talk about it. Mother Qin mentioned some of Gu Jinglian's past. In the past, Gu Jinglian was ruthless in dealing with people. For example, in the past, when a servant accidentally broke a vase, Gu Jinglian would immediately chase the servant out of the Gu family. If it were now, he might show his displeasure with a look of displeasure, but at most, he would give the servant a verbal warning. He was no longer so ruthless and did not give the servant any leeway. Moreover, the fact that Master scolded me like that only means that he knows how to dote on people. Think about it, he blames me because you always vomit after eating my food. He feels sorry for you, so he can only vent his anger on me. I'm old and he's still young. How can I argue with him? As Aunt Qin spoke, she laughed to herself. Chu Ho was helpless. You guys have spoiled him since he was young. That's why he's so spoiled. If it were me, his temper wouldn't be so bad. Master's heart is not bad. Everyone outside says that he is very bad, and his reputation is extremely vicious. However, as long as you put your heart into it, you'll find that Master is actually very gentle inside. Aunt Qin sighed again. You say that we spoil him, but we also feel sorry for him. Master has been alone since he was young. He has no one close to him. We watched him grow up. But think about it, no one is perfect. How can there be a perfect person in this world? Other than old Master being a little arrogant and bad-tempered, there isn't anything bad about him. That was true. No one was perfect. No one was perfect in this world. Gu Jinglian was not a god. He was just a mortal. Even a god was not perfect, let alone a human. Chapter 37-40. Besides, Master's temper has been restrained a lot now. Look, no matter what troubles he has in business, he rarely brings these emotions home. You've been pregnant for so long, but he's never been angry with anyone else, let alone you. Even in front of you, he's never been angry with anyone else. People change for the sake of their loved ones. Even though you might not realize it as bystanders, we can see it very clearly. Although Master's change is subtle, we can still sense it. Chu Ho nodded. She had also noticed that Gu Jinglian's temper had been restrained a lot. He did not know how to take care of people, but after being pregnant for so long, he might not have done well in the things that he did not know how to do, but he did what he could. For example, when she was not feeling well at night, because her stomach was a little big and her back hurt from lying down, even if he was so sleepy that he could not open his eyes, he would use his hands to rub her sore waist. Sometimes, she would want to eat in the middle of the night. Gu Jinglian would even drive all the way to a 24-hour convenience store to buy some freshly cut fruits, biscuits, and bread. When he returned, she was usually already asleep. He would put these food by the bedside. When she woke up hungry again, she could reach out and get it. Chu Ho also saw it. The changes that Gu Jinglian had made for her were unimaginable. The short yet long period of early pregnancy seemed to have passed quietly in the wee hours of the morning. One day, Chu Ho woke up and a strong sense of hunger surrounded her. She shook Gu Jinglian awake and said that she wanted to eat drumsticks. Other than drumsticks, she wanted to eat rice and pork rib soup. She felt so hungry that she could swallow a cow. For some reason, this hunger was so fierce that as soon as she woke up, her appetite was great and she wanted to eat and drink. However, Gu Jinglian was a little cautious. Ever since she started having pregnancy symptoms, she couldn't touch these oily things. Now, she suddenly said that she wanted to eat chicken drumsticks and pork rib soup. However, even though he was a little worried, Gu Jinglian still got out of bed and woke Uncle Fu up so that he could take care of it. Uncle Fu was also a good cook. He didn't wake Mama Qin up and cooked a pot of pork ribs and radish soup, braised chicken legs, and a pot of rice. The group of people sat at the dining table and were on tenterhooks. They were sweating profusely until Chu Ho finished a bowl of rice, 2 drumsticks, and a few ribs. His mouth was glistening with oil. She was so hungry that she couldn't care less about her manners. She was so focused on eating that the rice grains stuck to the corners of her mouth. Gu Jinglian's heart ached when he saw her eating in such a hurry. He knew that she was too hungry. Perhaps it was hard for ordinary people to understand this kind of hunger. She was so hungry that her whole body was trembling. It was as if she would faint in the next second. After breakfast, Chu Ho went back to her room and lay down. Gu Jinglian didn't dare to sleep. He was worried that she would feel nauseous again and vomit everything that she had eaten. Everyone was on high alert, but they did not expect Chu He to sleep for the entire morning and only wake up at noon. At noon, Mama Qin made another pot of braised pork. Chu Ho got up and sat down to eat again. However, because she wasn't that hungry anymore, she didn't eat in a hurry. For the whole afternoon, Chu Ho didn't show any signs of vomiting. Chapter 3741. In the end, even though everyone was on guard for the whole afternoon, Chu Ho still showed no signs of vomiting. Uncle Fu cheered. It was probably because the pregnancy period had passed. This time, they didn't have to worry about oil anymore. At night, when Gu Jinglian came back, the whole family sat around the dining table. Gu Jinglian gave her a few pieces of red braised pork and urged her to eat a few pieces of meat. After eating, she didn't show any signs of nausea. Mother Qin said happily, "Chu Ho, don't you feel uncomfortable anymore?" "Yes, I don't." Chu Ho said with a smile, "I won't vomit anymore." But Mother Qin beamed with joy. She and Uncle Fu looked at each other and were very gratified. "It's good that you don't vomit anymore. You can finally nourish your body." Uncle Fu said with heartache, "You haven't been able to eat much oil recently, and the whole family has been nervous. You haven't seen old Master. He hasn't slept well for a few days, and he's worried that you're not feeling well." Gu Jinglian cleared his throat and looked at him warningly, blaming him for talking too much. Uncle Fu smiled. "Old Master is shy. He's worried about his wife, and he won't let others talk about it." "Uncle Fu!" Gu Jinglian warned again, and Uncle Fu was so scared that he kept quiet. Chu Ho covered her mouth and laughed. "All right, stop threatening Uncle Fu," Chu Ho said. Then she said to Uncle Fu, "Uncle Fu, I've made you and Mother Qin worry for a while. I don't know what happened, but in just one night when I woke up, I really wanted to eat some oil and meat. I was craving it. After eating drumsticks and ribs, I didn't feel sick or sick. It's really amazing. At that time, when I was pregnant, it was the same. This pregnancy reaction came and went quickly. It came and went quickly. It came and went as I wished. It was gone just like that. This means that your pregnancy reaction has subsided. He nodded as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. The pregnancy reaction was too torturous. She didn't know how to get through this period of time. It was too torturous. She also felt tormented, and so did everyone else. Fortunately, it was already over. After the pregnancy symptoms passed, Auntie Qin and Uncle Fu were busy adjusting her body. Due to her pregnancy symptoms, she had been eating and vomiting, and she had lost a lot of weight. Hence, Mama Qin stewed an old hen and fed it to Chu-ho with chicken soup for 3 days in a row, hoping that Chu-ho would be able to replenish the nutrients that she had lost previously. Chu-ho didn't really like soup, so Uncle Fu coaxed her. The nutrients of an old hen are all in the soup. Eating chicken can't compare to drinking this soup. Besides, you have to think about it. This chicken soup isn't for you to drink. You have to think about it. You're pregnant with 2 little guys. If you don't want to, then don't treat them unfairly. When Uncle Fu said this, Chu-ho understood. For the sake of the 2 little guys in her stomach who were waiting to be fed, Chu-ho drank the soup no matter how much she didn't like it. There weren't many ingredients in the chicken soup. It was the original flavor. Although it was light, it was also naturally delicious. Other than the chicken soup and rib soup, Uncle Fu also paid attention to the nutritional balance. According to the nutritionist's formula, Chu-ho gained some weight after half a month. Everyone was happy. This meant that the nutritious meals made sense. In half a month, she had more or less gained weight. However, Chu-ho was a little worried. Chapter 3742. Uncle Fu, if you keep feeding me like this, I'll definitely become a pig. Uncle Fu was amused when he heard this. But, are you worried that old master will despise you if you become a pig? Chu-ho laughed and said, if I really become a pig, I'll despise myself, let alone him. No, why would old master despise you? Chu-ho snorted and said, I don't want to eat until I'm fat. Don't feed me so much in the future. However, even though he said that, he still continued to eat. She still ate and slept as usual. He felt that she was almost no different from a pig. She ate and slept. She did not have to worry about anything. Gradually, when she was more than 5 months pregnant, Chu-ho's belly became bigger and bigger. Usually, a 5-month pregnant woman's belly wouldn't be very big, but Chu-ho's belly had become round and bulging. Usually, when he was at home, he didn't notice it. However, when Gu Jinglian accompanied him to the prenatal checkup, the contrast was immediately reflected when he compared it with other 5-month pregnant women. Chu-ho even wondered if his belly had become so big from eating too much, or if there were other reasons. The doctor said that other people only had 1 child, but he had 2. Naturally, his belly was bigger than other people's. However, this was too big. Because he was more than 5 months pregnant, Mother Qin was worried that Chu-ho's hair was too long and he was eating too much nutrition. Hence, she suggested to Gu Jinglian that they take Chu-ho to have his hair trimmed and cut. However, Gu Jinglian wasn't very willing to do so. He couldn't understand how his hair could be nourished. However, Mother Qin said that his hair was very nutritious, especially the ends of Chu-ho's hair. They were actually a little split, which meant that the nutrients couldn't keep up with such long hair. Seeing that Gu Jinglian was unwilling, Mother Qin persuaded him again and again. She said that his hair could grow again if he cut it. With that said, Gu Jinglian reluctantly agreed. However, Gu Jinglian could not bear to cut too much hair. The scissors reached his ears, so Gu Jinglian could not bear to cut his hair. He stood at the side and stared at the scissors in the barber's hand. His burning gaze made the barber feel as if the scissors in his hand were about to melt. It was so hot. Even though Uncle Fu was standing by the side, desperately hinting at the hairdresser to cut it a little shorter, the hairdresser could only laugh bitterly and did not dare to cut it anymore. Only then did Uncle Fu notice Gu Jinglian's cold gaze. When he understood what was going on, he did not know whether to laugh or cry. He scolded in his heart, "Master is already such an adult. Why is he acting like a child at this time?" After cutting her hair, Chu-ho stood up and looked at herself in the mirror. She used to have short hair, but after she got together with Gu Jinglian, she stopped cutting her hair. Now that she had cut her hair short, she was not used to it. How is it? Chu-ho turned to look at Gu Jinglian and mumbled, I'm not used to my short hair. Gu Jinglian snorted unhappily. He was not used to it even more than she was. Seeing his unhappy expression, Chu-ho suddenly reached out and patted his head. All right, don't be angry. When we unload the goods, I'll let my hair grow a little longer. Unload the goods? Gu Jinglian did not understand what this term was. Chu-ho and Uncle Fu looked at each other and smiled. Unload the goods was a term used in the maternity circle. It meant to give birth. Chapter 3743. She didn't use WeChat much, but ever since she got pregnant, she had been bored out of her mind. She started fumbling with her phone and entered a WeChat group for expectant mothers in the same city. It was filled with pregnant women or women who had just given birth. Some of them were lying in the waiting room, chatting on WeChat about how they felt about waiting for labor. For example, how painful the contractions were, and how they had only opened 3 fingers in one night. Some of them wanted to give birth naturally, but they couldn't, so they had to resort to C-sections. There were all kinds of people in the world. At first, Chu-ho thought it was interesting. With the intention of learning from it, she also spoke enthusiastically in the group. Later, she realized that this WeChat group was more like a treehole. Many expectant mothers complained and sought comfort in it. Chu-ho's deepest impression was of a pregnant woman who was 7 months pregnant crying in the WeChat group. Because she couldn't have sex during pregnancy, her husband asked her to do some outrageous things, but she was unwilling. Later, when she was 7 months pregnant, she accidentally found out that her husband was having an affair. She was in despair and pain. Her voice resonated with the other pregnant women. Actually, it wasn't completely true that one couldn't have sex during pregnancy. At least, except for the first 3 months and the last 3 months, as long as it wasn't intense, it was okay to have sex during the middle. However, most expectant mothers were protective of their children and refused to have sex no matter what. There were many conflicts between husband and wife. Some husbands couldn't tolerate it at all, so they had women outside and even went to ask for sex. Many people couldn't accept this fact, but they didn't know how to face it. Most of them just turned a blind eye. What else can I do? My stomach is so big and I'm going to give birth soon. Do I have to divorce him while I'm pregnant? If we get divorced, the child will belong to me. I can't afford it. If the child belongs to him, I won't accept it. I have nothing left. The house and car are premarital assets. I won't get a single cent. As long as it's not too much and they don't come knocking on my door, I can only tolerate it. There's no choice. After being pregnant for so long, no man can tolerate it. That's right. Men are all animals who think with their lower bodies. Can they really tolerate it for more than 10 months? After giving birth, they still have to go through confinement. After that, there's a long breastfeeding period. They'll be busy taking care of the child and their married life will definitely be unhappy. After this period of time, it'll be fine. As long as it's not too much. However, Chu-ho disagreed and said, if a man cheats, it's absolutely unforgivable. It doesn't matter if they have other women outside or if they have short-lived relationships with other women, they are all betrayals and can never be forgiven. After the first time, if they are forgiven, there will be a second time, a third time, and countless times because they will realize that they don't need to pay any price for such a mistake. However, no one acknowledged her words. However, many people did not say anything. A pregnant woman did not know that her husband had cheated on her. She was a little resentful and said to Chu-ho, all men in the world are the same. I have to advise you to be more careful. Your husband is fine in front of you, but who knows what he is like behind your back? How many women do you have outside? How far along are you? Looking at your note, you've been pregnant for more than 5 months. A normal man wouldn't be able to hold himself back. Chapter 3744. He'll accompany me for dinner and walks. I don't have to be careful. I trust him. Without a comparison, Chu-ho would not have realized how gentle and responsible Gu Jinglian was. Every day, other than work matters, he would spend most of his time around her, fearing that he would overlook her. In the WeChat group, there was too much negativity. Many of them were stay-at-home wives who did not have jobs and relied on their husbands for most of their lives. During her pregnancy, her husband did not want to be lonely and had an affair. Many people were angry but did not dare to say anything. Even if they knew, the most they would do was cry and throw a tantrum. Some men with a conscience would often admit their mistakes and say that there would not be a next time. This was to give her a way out. If they were pushed too hard, the man would say, "Then let's get a divorce." Many people would be at a loss and would not know what to do. It was as if they did not know what to do if they left the man. That woman was aggressive. You trust him. Before this happened to my man, I also trusted him. I did not suspect that he would go out and find another woman. But it has happened. I don't want to believe it, but I have to accept the reality. Men are all like this. If you don't know, it's good that he hid it, but it doesn't mean that it didn't happen. It didn't happen, but it doesn't mean that it won't happen. Just wait and see. Can your man endure 5 months? Can he endure 10 months? Can he endure 10 months? Can he endure your confinement and breastfeeding period? Don't think too highly of men. Men are like that. Her last sentence was full of contempt. Chu-ho laughed. You were betrayed by your husband. Look, all the women in the world are as miserable as you. But you don't have to impose your misfortune on me to make your husband look so dignified. My husband is a responsible man. You don't have to smear his reputation. How confident are you? That woman laughed. Your man must be very ugly. Otherwise, why can't he even find another woman? Seeing that the atmosphere was getting tense, the others said nervously, Don't be like this. Everyone should be friendly. Don't make things unpleasant. Since this has happened, let's think of a way to deal with it. Don't quarrel. Exactly. Chu-ho stopped talking and threw his phone aside. He was full of anger. She was not angry because the man had cheated on her, but because these women condoned the betrayal. If it were her, she would not be able to tolerate such betrayal. She even wondered if Gu Jinglian would get tired of this marriage one day and fall in love with another woman. If that was really the case, she would not try to save him. When he had a change of heart, he was already not loyal to his marriage. She couldn't accept a little bit of infidelity. Be it his body or mind, he could not tolerate even the slightest bit of betrayal. Similarly, she would not betray him. Even if a man better than him appeared one day, she would never betray him. Since she had chosen him and had bowed to the heavens and earth during the wedding, she had made a promise. She had to be faithful to her promise and stay by his side for the rest of her life. This was Chu-ho's understanding of marriage. Apart from natural disasters and man-made disasters, life and death, there was nothing that could separate them. Then, did Gu Jinglian think the same? Chapter 3745. Chu-ho put her phone aside and ignored the WeChat messages. However, a few people in the WeChat group had formed a new group. One of the pregnant women who had a conflict with Chu-ho just now was unhappy with Chu-ho and started to make a scene in the group. Who was the one who pulled Chu-ho into the group? How can there be such a naive woman in this world? Men are not good people. It's not that I want to overturn everyone, but this is the problem. How many men these days are really responsible? The people in the group started chatting as well. I admit that there are men who don't cheat on their wives. However, we are pregnant and have to do some teaching at home. In the end, when men come home, they are either lying on the sofa or lying on the bed. They are just like masters. At this point, she opened the floodgates of resentment. Most of the pregnant women who joined the group did not have a harmonious family life. After complaining about their disappointing husbands, one of them sent a disdainful emoji. That Chu-ho just wants to show off how much her husband loves her, how well he treats her, and how much he dotes on her. She just wants to feel superior. I don't think so. Her husband must be very ugly. I have seen men who are obedient to their wives. They are either very ugly or very honest. I have seen many rich people and rich second-generation heirs. Which one of them doesn't have a red flag at home and a red flag outside? At this moment, the pregnant woman who had pulled Chu-ho into the group spoke. I was the one who pulled Chu-ho into the group. At that time, we met during a prenatal checkup. My mother-in-law accompanied me for a prenatal checkup. Chu Ho seemed to be accompanied by her husband. Her husband accompanied her for a prenatal checkup? The group of people was shocked. It was not that it was strange for a husband to accompany Chu Ho for a prenatal checkup, but that person had exaggerated and described how Gu Jinglian protected Chu Ho and how considerate he was. Many people felt that it was unfair. Then her husband must be very ugly. Exactly. How can there be such a handsome and gentle husband who is so considerate of his wife? He's simply the best of the best. It's hard to come by in 100 years. Why did she have to meet him? That person said meekly, I've seen Chu Ho's husband before. It's unforgettable. He's even more handsome than a celebrity. You guys know Gu Xingzhe, right? At the mention of Gu Xingzhe, everyone reacted. I know, the nation's Prince Charming, but isn't he dead? Chu Ho's husband looks quite similar to Gu Xingzhe. At first glance, I thought Gu Xingzhe wasn't dead. I even suspected that the news of Gu Xingzhe's death was an excuse for Gu Xingzhe to retire from the entertainment industry. Perhaps Gu Xingzhe isn't dead. He just got married and wanted to retire from the entertainment industry to return to his family. He was afraid that his fans wouldn't be able to accept it and would jump off a building to commit suicide. That's why he staged it himself. That's impossible. At that time, the media reported that they saw Gu Xingzhe with their own eyes at the memorial service. He's really dead. It's true. That's strange. How similar do they look? He's a little more handsome than Gu Xingzhe. Also, when he accompanied Chu Ho for a prenatal checkup, there was a butler with them. I heard Chu Ho call him Uncle Fu, and that Uncle Fu called him Master Gu. Chapter 3746. His surname is also Gu? Did you mistake son-in-law for Master Gu? Many people felt it was unfair. Are you serious? AI me, did you see wrongly? Is Chu Ho's husband really that handsome? Yeah, I'm just jealous. My husband hasn't accompanied me for many prenatal checkups, but I think Chu Ho's husband seems to know how to take care of her. He wouldn't even let her carry a normal hospital bag. Chu Ho's belly is even bigger than mine. When I was waiting for the prenatal checkup report, I saw her husband holding her hand and walking slowly along the corridor. They didn't talk much, but I could tell that they were very close. To be honest, I was a little jealous when I saw that. I really can't compare them. It's infuriating to compare. At that time, I thought that it would be great if I were Chu Ho. I wouldn't have to work so hard to get pregnant. She sent another long paragraph. Pregnancy is really hard. I don't understand these men. They make it seem like they're working and I'm at home with a big belly, so it's so easy. I can't ask him to accompany me for a walk, but he says that I don't understand him and that it's so hard for him to earn money. Sometimes, when I'm alone, he'll lie next to me at night and play with his phone. After playing for a while, he'll fall asleep without caring about me. Sometimes, when I'm sad and cry at night, he won't change his mind. When we got married, he made it sound so nice. He said that he would love me and understand me all his life, but what happened in the end? Because I was pregnant, I quit my job and stayed at home to take care of my husband and child. Now, Dabao is going to kindergarten and I'm pregnant with another one. I still have to send Dabao to school every morning and play with him at night. I asked him to take care of the child, but he refused. I really don't understand why I married him. Now he's raising a slut outside. I even found it in his WeChat chat history. Tell me, why did he keep the chat history? Was he deliberately showing it to me? I'd rather he be smarter and more cunning. I'd rather he delete the chat history and lie to me for the rest of his life. Now, I don't even know if I should divorce him. Get a divorce. Do you want to keep this kind of man for the new year? But if we get a divorce, he bought the house before we got married. My house has been renovated, and it's a big flat that costs hundreds of thousands. He even bought a car. If we get a divorce, I won't have a share of the house. I might not even be able to get custody of the children. Even if I get custody, I might not be able to afford to raise them. You have to be careful with your divorce. Divorced women were often discriminated against. No matter how good a woman is, once she hears that it's her second marriage, her value will immediately drop. It's not fair. Just thinking about it makes me angry. At this time, someone said coldly, "You see others living a glamorous life, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are truly happy. Just like on the surface, aren't you in love with your husband? How can others see the resentment and grievances you've suffered in private? Chu-ho's life might be worse than yours." She even had a strong sense of justice, saying that her husband would never cheat on her. I think she doesn't even know that I cheated on her. Chapter 3747. A group of pregnant women became like a group of resentful women because of some trivial matters in their lives. Isn't there a gathering soon? At that time, we can meet Chu-ho's husband. I want to see who he is. Chu-ho had no idea that a few pregnant women had started a small group and were talking about her. When Gu Jinglian returned home, she was sitting on the sofa and learning how to knit a scarf from Mother Qin. The weather was getting cold. She thought that since she was pregnant and had nothing to do, the whole family would take care of her properly. Hence, she wanted to learn how to knit. Knitting a scarf was a beginner level and was very simple. Hence, she planned to knit a scarf for Gu Jinglian, Xiaobao, and Lin Shich. It was a good opportunity to practice. Hence, she asked Mother Qin for help. Mother Qin naturally taught her everything without holding back. When Gu Jinglian returned home, Chu-ho was sitting on the sofa and knitting a scarf. She had already started the needle and was knitting several rows. Gu Jinglian was stunned. He could not associate a good wife and loving mother like knitting a scarf with Chu-ho. "What are you doing?" When Chu-ho heard this, she looked up. She was so focused on knitting the scarf that she did not realize that he was back. "You're back." Chu-ho smiled. "It's getting cold. I want to knit a scarf for you, Xiaobao, and Lin Shi." Gu Jinglian did not have the habit of wearing a scarf. Usually, he would get into the car directly after leaving the house. No matter where he went, the heater would be on, so there was no need for a scarf. However, if it was knitted by her, it would be a different story. Gu Jinglian was inexplicably happy, but he did not seem to care much. He casually picked up the ball of yarn and asked, "Do you know how to knit?" "Mother Qin taught me. Although it's not very difficult and the pattern is very simple, I've already gotten the hang of it." "Oh." Gu Jinglian pretended to be calm and scribbled, "Oh, I'll knit it later. Let's go downstairs for dinner." After he finished speaking, he turned around expressionlessly. However, when he turned around, the corners of his lips curled up slightly, unable to contain the smug and satisfied curve. When she went downstairs, Uncle Fu happened to be upstairs. He saw Gu Jinglian walking downstairs with a smile on his face as if he had seen a ghost. When Gu Jinglian saw his eyes widen, he immediately stopped smiling and resumed his usual cold expression. "Why are your eyes so wide open?" "Master," Uncle Fu asked tentatively, "what are you so happy about today? Why are you asking this? Look at you, the corners of your mouth are about to split open." Gu Jinglian frowned slightly and subconsciously rubbed the corner of his lips with his hand. He noticed Uncle Fu's teasing gaze and said angrily, "You're mistaken." With that, Gu Jinglian walked down the stairs seriously, not caring about his expression. Uncle Fu covered his mouth and snickered. Master's awkwardness hadn't changed at all. It was not until Uncle Fu walked into the room and saw Chu-ho that she put aside the scarves she had been knitting. He was a little surprised. "You're knitting a scarf?" Mother Qin smiled. "This is for Master." Chu-ho picked a dark gray one. However, Chu-ho is smart and learns everything quickly. I've only taught her the first time and she's already learned it well. When Uncle Fu heard this, he could not help but laugh. No wonder Master looked so pleased with himself when he put it down and went downstairs. Chapter 3748. What an awkward feeling. Uncle Fu muttered to himself. Chu-ho asked Uncle Fu, "Uncle Fu, do you think a dark gray one suits Jinglian?" "Yes, it suits him. It's fine as long as you think it suits him. It can't be just me who thinks it suits him. What if he doesn't look good in it?" Chu-ho smiled and said, "He doesn't usually wear a scarf. I wonder if he'll wear it after I finish knitting it?" As she said this, Chu-ho muttered to herself, "Why don't I give this scarf to Xiaobao?" Earlier, when she saw that Gu Jinglian didn't seem interested in the scarf in her hands, She was worried that she would be upset if he didn't even look at it after she had painstakingly knitted it and left it in the wardrobe. Uncle Fu panicked and said, "You can't do that. Didn't you say that you would knit this scarf for Old Master? If you give it to Xiao Bao, Old Master will be angry." Angry? But Chu Ho was a little confused. It's not that he doesn't like to wear scarves. That's different. Uncle Fu said, "As long as it's knitted by you, Old Master will definitely wear it every day. He won't throw it away even if it's torn." After a pause, he smiled again and said, "Chu Ho, don't you know Old Master's character? He has a sharp tongue but a soft heart. Perhaps he'll verbally complain that the scarf you knitted is not pretty, but he'll actually be happy on the inside. However, Old Master has always been awkward. He may say that he doesn't like it, but he actually likes it very much. It's just that he doesn't want to lose face and say it directly." Really? Chu Ho smiled when she heard this, but she didn't quite understand. "I don't understand what's so awkward about him. If he likes it, he likes it. If he doesn't like it, he doesn't like it. Can't he be a little more open about it? Men are different from women. Old Master's character is like suffering because he wants to lose face." Alright. Chu Ho shook his head, looked at the scarf in his hand and said, "I'll probably finish this scarf in a few days. By then, the weather will be cold and he will be able to wear it." "Yes." Uncle Fu said again, "Hurry up and go down for dinner. I made chicken soup for you. Don't let it get cold." After dinner, Chu Ho continued to knit for a while until her eyes were blurry. She then put the scarf aside and picked up her phone to take a look. It was a message notification. When she unlocked the screen, she saw the woman who had added her to the Mother-to-Be chat group. She asked her, "Are you coming to the Mother-to-Be's social gathering next week? Where is he? Are you there? Why aren't you replying? Are you still angry about what happened this afternoon?" When Chu Ho saw this, he replied, "An exchange meeting for expectant mothers. What is this for? Didn't I tell you before?" That person immediately replied, "After all, many mother-to-be in the group feel lonely after getting pregnant, besides taking care of the fetus. Everyone happens to be from the same city, and they are all mother-to-be. Some of them are veterans who have already given birth. It's rare for everyone to gather together to chat and share their experiences." Chu Ho was a little hesitant. "I've been busy knitting scarves recently. I don't think I have time to go out." The point was, after all, they had gotten into an argument, so it was inevitable that it would be awkward to see them. Knitting scarves? For the baby? Chapter 3749. "Aya, you should ask me for advice on this. I'm an expert at knitting. I know all kinds of patterns. I can teach you. I'll definitely teach you without holding anything back." Chu Ho was amused. "Are you serious? I'm clumsy and won't be able to learn all this. I won't be able to learn quickly." "Don't worry. I'm very patient. When the time comes and you bring all the materials over, I'll draw for you. I guarantee that you'll get the hang of it quickly." "Oh." Chu Ho was a little tempted. That person continued, "Actually, I know that you're probably afraid that it'll be awkward when you meet her because of the argument in the group. But it's okay. We're all moms and don't have any bad intentions. Actually, she's upset too. She's already upset. If you continue to say that, won't you be suspected of making her hate you?" Chu Ho smiled and replied, "I'm not angry anymore. I was just being nice and felt that it's wrong for a man to have an affair. In the end, she went overboard and argued with me. Actually, there's no need for me to say so much to her. She lives her own life and others can't tell her what to do. I'm not angry anymore. I just feel wronged. She shouldn't have been so nice. If it had been someone else, they would have thought that she was showing off. It was pointless to say anything when they didn't get along. But what she said was true. Then it's settled." That person probed, "Will your husband come then?" Chu Ho sent a confused emoji. "Why would my husband come? Aya, if your husband comes, it'll be easier for us to interact. Otherwise, it won't be appropriate to leave him alone at home when you're out." The date of the appointment happened to be a Sunday. She had thought that Gu Jinglian didn't have to go to work. In fact, although Gu Jinglian had holidays, they were not fixed. He could rest whenever he wanted, but most of the time, he didn't rest much. On Sundays, if Chu Ho didn't need a prenatal checkup and there wasn't anything important, he would still go to the office, but he would come back earlier. Chu Ho said, "My husband is a little busy. He probably won't be able to go." "Let's go together. Doesn't your husband rest on Sundays?" "He doesn't rest. So hard." That person sent a smiling emoji. "Is your husband a salaryman? Which company do you work for?" However, Chu Ho was not willing to talk about Gu Jinglian's profession in depth, so he changed the topic and said, "I understand. I will definitely be there on that day. When the time comes, I will need you to teach me how to knit the baby's cotton-padded clothes." "It's nothing. As long as you come, I will teach you well." After ending the conversation in a hurry, Chu Ho put down his phone and saw Gu Jinglian walking out of the bathroom. Looking at him, she was reminded of the conversation she had in the group earlier. For a moment, she felt a little uncomfortable. Sitting on the bed, she groaned and called out to him, "Gu Jinglian, I have a question for you." Even though they were married, she was still used to calling him that in most cases. Gu Jinglian turned around and raised his eyebrows as he wiped his wet hair. "What's wrong?" "Let me ask you a question." "Okay, go ahead." "What do you think about cheating?" "Cheating?" Gu Jinglian's eyes flashed with confusion. "Why are you asking this?" Chapter 3750. There's nothing to answer. Gu Jinglian sat on the sofa and pursed his lips. What's there to cheat on? If you don't like her, you can just break up. Since you've already broken up with someone else, there's no cheating, right? Then, what if you cheat on someone else when you're still together? Gu Jinglian smiled. I don't understand. Why are you still thinking about someone else when you're still together? Chu Ho hesitated. Maybe your feelings for her have faded? You don't like her anymore? Gu Jinglian replied bluntly, if you don't like being apart, then so be it. What if you still like her? It was just a moment of impulse. If you still like her, there's no reason to cheat on her. You're already an adult. Don't use impulse as an excuse for everything. Gu Jinglian paused and his gaze suddenly became dangerous. He stared at her meaningfully. Why are you suddenly asking this? Are you going to cheat? Pfft. Chu Ho snorted coldly. Of course not. Is there a need for me to cheat? Besides, I'm pregnant. How can I cheat on her? I'm more like a condom. A condom? How dare you? Gu Jinglian looked even more nervous. What's the matter? Why are you suddenly asking this? I feel like you have something on your mind. I heard that some men, when their wives are pregnant, can't have sex. Once they have a physical need, they'll go outside and find other women to satisfy themselves. Chu Ho paused and said, will you have a situation where you can't hold it in? Gu Jinglian's mood was a little gloomy when he mentioned this. What can I do if I can't hold it in? Gu Jinglian said meaningfully, someone won't understand me either. Ahem. Chu Ho looked away awkwardly. But don't worry. I can hold it in. Chu Ho suddenly asked, will you forgive me for cheating on you? Gu Jinglian was stunned. Seeing that Chu Ho seemed to be very persistent about this question, he answered seriously, everyone has a bottom line. It depends on what the bottom line is. For me, my answer is no. I'll never forgive a man who betrays me. No matter who he is, I'll treat him equally. You're my wife, and you have to be loyal to me. Similarly, I'm your husband, so I have to be responsible for you too. Being loyal to you is my bottom line. Chu Ho's eyes immediately. Are you serious? Of course. Gu Jinglian didn't think so. Do you think I'm joking? Since I'm married to you, I'm not divorced. I'm only widowed. Chu He felt an inexplicable chill in her heart and asked half-jokingly, if I cheat on you, will you strangle me to death? Yes, I will choke you to death first, then choke that adulterer to death. How? Be it no that. Gu Jinglian snorted. So, be good and don't betray me. I won't strangle you to death. What about you? Chu He suddenly asked with interest, what will you do if you betray me? What will I do? First of all, without this assumption, I can't. Chu Ho didn't believe her. You're that confident? I'm married. Chapter 3751. Chu Ho smiled. She knew what kind of man Gu Jinglian was. Although he had an awkward personality, he never bothered to say hypocritical sweet words. That was because he was a very strong man. Therefore, he did not need to say hypocritical words to win the favor of others. It had always been others pleasing him. He had never spent any effort to please others. Therefore, what he said was 100% from the bottom of his heart. He could not forgive her betrayal. Similarly, he would not betray her. Marriage was his choice, so he had to be loyal to his choice. Rather than saying that he was loyal to her, it was more accurate to say that he was loyal to his own decision. If he really did not like her, then he would divorce her and start the next relationship. When his wife was pregnant, Gu Jinglian scoffed at him for finding another woman because he could not tolerate not having sex with her. If a man could not even control his most primitive desires, what was the difference between him and a low-level primitive creature? The reason why humans were called high-level creatures was that they were smart and knew how to control their 7 emotions and 6 desires. If they could not even control it for more than 10 months, to him, they were like low-level creatures who had not completely evolved. He believed that men were more capable than women. They had strong physiques, tall figures, and extraordinary courage. Why couldn't men do things that even women could do? Gu Jinglian was initially a little suspicious as to why Chu Ho would ask such a question. However, Chu Ho did not intend to hide it from him. Do you still remember the pregnant woman I met during the prenatal checkup? Yes, I remember. Later, she pulled me into a group of expectant mothers. It was full of expectant mothers. I thought that since we were all pregnant women, we would definitely be able to learn from each other's experience. After a pause, Chu Ho told him the whole story again. Gu Jinglian did not take it to heart when he heard it. After all, that was other women's business. Their husbands had cheated. What did it have to do with him? He could not be bothered to ask. Furthermore, things like cheating and betrayal were actually very rare and common. He was not interested in understanding what those pregnant women thought of him. Chu Ho repeated her words verbatim. She also said that my husband must be very ugly. Otherwise, how could you resist me when I was pregnant for so long? She said that you would definitely not betray me. What happened to you? Gu Jinglian asked. Compared to other people's opinions, he cared more about her opinion and feelings toward him. He didn't care about the others. Chu Ho said, my husband definitely wouldn't cheat on me, because even if he did, he wouldn't be able to find someone as beautiful as me. Gu Jinglian, where's your face? Shameless. Where does your confidence come from? Gu Jinglian snorted coldly. There aren't many who are prettier than you, but there are many who are more feminine, flirtatious, and romantic than you. There are many men who are gentler than you. Chu Ho continued, there are many men who are more handsome than you. Poor they. Tell me about them. I think that Yun Shishir's husband, Mu Yaja, is very handsome. Gu Jinglian, however, was disdainful. He sneered fiercely, how can he compare to me? Why can't he compare to you? Isn't he very handsome? I think he's more manly than you. Gu Jinglian. Chapter 3752. Chu Ho was referring to his manliness, probably referring to his facial features. Gu Jinglian's facial features were more feminine. He was handsome, but his facial features were more exquisite than a woman's. Especially the mole at the corner of his eye, it made his eyes look even more devilish. Don't compare him to me, Gu Jinglian said expressionlessly. He doesn't deserve to be compared to me. But, to be honest, Chu Ho asked curiously, if a man doesn't do it for a long time, will he really not be able to hold it in? It's true that I feel uncomfortable, but I can't help it. Gu Jinglian said slowly, after all, not every man has my willpower. Chu Ho teased, have you really never done it yourself? You seem to know a lot about this? Chu Ho pretended to downplay it. In fact, she did know a little about this. When she was serving in the mercenary team, whenever she went on a mission with a group of men, many mercenaries would go to the red light district to get drunk after the mission was over. It was unavoidable. There was a period of time when they were camping in Africa because of a mission. When she lay down in a tent, the mercenaries thought that she was asleep, so they started to talk about dirty things. Only then did she know that men would sometimes solve it with their hands. Everyone had their biological needs, regardless of whether they were men or women. However, for people in their profession, they did not have the opportunity to fall in love. Therefore, to solve their biological needs, most of them just had to find a woman to do it for them. They each had their own needs. At first, she felt that this kind of thing was quite despicable. However, after thinking about it, it was just wishful thinking. It was just a normal biological need. Gu Jinglian said, "Don't think about those messy things. Let's sleep early." The two of them went to bed early. The day before the gathering, Chu Ho finished wrapping up one of her scarves. When she put the scarf on Gu Jinglian, a certain man was standing in front of the mirror. The dark gray scarf matched his black clothes very well. Gu Jinglian fiddled with the scarf. The main reason was that he was never used to wearing a scarf. He only wore it because she knitted it. However, the furry thing around his neck was a little uncomfortable. However, that didn't stop him from liking the scarf. However, no matter how much he liked it in his heart, no matter how much he loved it, his face remained indifferent as if he didn't care much about it. He even said in disdain, "This scarf is a little too long." "It's not long. Don't you think it looks more elegant if it's a little longer?" Gu Jinglian said, "You seem to know how to match clothes." Chu Ho blushed. In fact, the thing she paid the least attention to was dressing up. Usually, when she went out, she would just dress casually. Sometimes, Uncle Fu couldn't stand it and would personally match her clothes. "What? You don't like it?" "It's all right. You look like you're forcing it." Chu Ho clearly knew that he was being arrogant, but she still pretended to be sulky and reached out to untie his scarf. "If you don't like it, give it back to me. I'll put it on Xiao Bao." "What are you doing?" Gu Jinglian instinctively protected the scarf and pushed her hand away. He asked angrily, "Didn't you knit this for me?" She had knitted it for him. Why should she give it to that brat? Chapter 3753. She was just trying to provoke him. She wanted him to admit that he liked the scarf. Gu Jinglian turned his face away. His large hands gripped the scarf tightly as he pursed his thin lips and did not say a word. Chu Ho even walked in front of him, only to see Gu Jinglian looking out of the window disdainfully with an expression that said, "This is mine." She snickered in her heart but pretended to play it down to provoke him. "If you don't like it, I won't force you to wear it, right? Why don't you give it to Xiao Bao? Xiao Bao will definitely like it very much. As long as it's knitted by me, he'll still like it no matter how ugly it is." Gu Jinglian frowned but did not say a word. He looked like a child who was throwing a tantrum. For him, Xiao Bao has been looking forward to seeing what kind of scarf I knit for him. This will save me the time to knit another one. Gu Jinglian pursed his lips unhappily. "No way. This is mine." Every word he said sounded like a childish child. Chu Ho was laughing in her heart. Oh my God. How did she just realize that this man had such an adorable side to him? He obviously acted like he didn't like it very much and was disdainful of it. Since he didn't like it, his hands were protecting the scarf so tightly. It was like a child protecting his beloved toy. "Do you like it then?" Chu Ho asked again. Gu Jinglian's gaze returned to the mirror. His handsome face was gloomy, but he still pretended to be nonchalant and said, "Although it's not very nice, I'll wear it since you knitted it for me." He seemed to emphasize that "you knitted it for me," as if it was her greatest honor that he was willing to wear it. He was giving her face. Chu Ho was even more disdainful. "Listen carefully. I'm asking you if you like it, not if you're willing to wear it." Why was he so awkward? She really wanted to rub his face. Gu Jinglian grunted and said vaguely, "It's all right." Chu Ho reached out to snatch the scarf from his neck. "Forget it, I won't force you." "Not allowed." "Give it back." "No." Gu Jinglian put on the scarf and ran away. Chu Ho, who was pregnant, chased after him. However, she was pregnant. How could she outrun Gu Jinglian? The two of them were fighting in the corridor. Chu Ho was furious. Gu Jinglian saw that she couldn't catch up with him, so he retreated and snorted provocatively. "This is mine. You gave it to me. How can you take it back?" Chu Ho was so angry that he was panting. Suddenly, pain flashed across his face. He clutched his stomach and squatted down with a pained expression. He let out a painful groan. When Gu Jinglian saw this, he immediately rushed over anxiously. He held her shoulders and asked anxiously, "What's wrong? What's going on? Was she about to give birth?" That was impossible. How long had she been pregnant? There was still a long way to go before her due date. Chu Ho stammered, You made me angry." "How did I make you angry?" "Ouch." Chu Ho simply collapsed in his arms and clutched her stomach, looking like she was in great pain. Gu Jinglian was even more helpless. She muttered, "Do you really not like my scarf at all? I knitted it for a long time and put a lot of effort into it." "I like it." Gu Jinglian blurted out without thinking, "I like it." "Really?" Chapter 3754. "Yeah, I really do like it." It was rare for Tsundergu to put down his pride and admit it himself. "I like the one you knitted. I'll wear it all the time. I'll wear it to sleep at night. No matter how hot the summer is, I won't be able to take it off." Chu Ho finally couldn't take it anymore. She couldn't keep up the act anymore. With a sound, she laughed out loud and quickly kissed him on the lips. "All right, I'm just teasing you." Gu Jinglian widened his eyes in shock. His fingertips touched his lips, which seemed to still be warm from her kiss. He looked down at Chu Ho again, only to see that she didn't seem to be in pain at all. Instead, she was looking at him with a smile. He realized that she had been deliberately mystifying him just now. Gu Jinglian was a little unhappy. "Are you kidding me? Why? Can't I?" Seeing his angry expression, Chu Ho deliberately provoked him. "Bite me." When Gu Jinglian heard this, he was so angry that he lowered his head and bit her lips. However, the bite wasn't heavy. Instead, it felt like he was acting coquettishly. Earlier, he was really scared out of his wits. He thought that something had happened to her. He was so scared that his face almost turned white. You're not allowed to joke about such things in the future. He would be worried. He would really be worried. When Chu Ho heard this, her heart felt as sweet as honey. However, she said stubbornly, "I know. But can you not be so duplicitous in the future? If you like me, you like me. Why won't you admit it?" Gu Jinglian hummed in acknowledgement, but his face was strangely red. Chu Ho pinched his handsome face. "Did you hear that? You're not allowed to be duplicitous." "I know." He snorted in annoyance, which meant that he had agreed. "Then let me ask you again. Do you like this scarf?" "I like it." "Then," Chu Ho asked tentatively, "will you wear it all the time?" "Of course. I said before that I won't take it off in the summer." Chu Ho was stunned. "Really? You won't take it off in the summer? If you have the ability to say it, then you have to do it. I've never seen anyone wearing a scarf in the summer and refusing to take it off. You should at least let me see the world." Gu Jinglian was furious. Just now, in order to coax her, he even said this. However, with his character, how could he go back on his words? If he wore it, then so be it. At most, he would get a heat stroke. Chu Ho laughed and couldn't bear to tease him anymore. "All right, I'm just joking with you." As she spoke, she was about to stand up. However, halfway through, her body froze. She frowned, leaned against the wall, and took a difficult step forward. Gu Jinglian thought that she was trying to be mysterious again, so he asked in annoyance, "What's wrong?" Chu Ho smiled flatteringly. "Yes, my legs are numb from squatting for too long." "How troublesome," Gu Jinglian muttered. He walked over, carried her in his arms and carried her back to the room. Behind them, Uncle Fu was hiding in a corner and secretly watching. Just now, when he passed by, he heard Chu Ho's pained voice and thought that something had happened. When he got closer, he realized that they were flirting, so he hid in a corner and watched. He sighed in his heart, love can really change a person. Old Master had indeed changed a lot for Chu Ho. At least, in the past, Old Master wouldn't have chatted and laughed with such a woman. Looking at his awkward expression and the way he was so nervous about Chu Ho, he knew how to place a person in his heart. Chapter 3755. After Chu Ho knitted the scarf for Gu Jinglian put it on before the weather turned cold. Everyone in the Gu family was surprised when he put on the scarf. It was only autumn and the weather had just turned cold. Gu Jinglian put on a thick scarf, shocking many people. Until Xiao Bao saw it. Thus, Xiao Bao started arguing with Chu Ho. Why does Daddy have a scarf but I don't? Mommy, didn't you say that you were going to knit a scarf for me? Xiao Bao was a little angry. He had thought that Chu Ho's first scarf was for him, but when he saw Gu Jinglian put it on, he was very jealous. Chu Ho comforted him, "Don't you have a few scarves?" "I want to wear the one that Mommy knit for me." Xiao Bao said coquettishly, "If Mommy knits a scarf for me, Xiao Bao will wear it every day. Even if it's hot in summer, I won't take it off." Chu Ho was speechless. They were indeed biological children. Both father and son's answers were the same. Chu Ho coaxed, "Okay. I promise to knit a hat for you, okay?" Xiao Bao nodded when he heard this. "But I like a green one. It's best if it's lake green. Even the color of an apple will do." "Green? But..." Chu Ho's eyelids twitched. "Yeah, what's wrong?" Xiao Bao obviously didn't understand the deeper meaning of a green hat, so he said, "Actually, it's fine if it's not green. A blue one looks good too. I like green and blue." Chu Ho didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so he said, "Then I'll knit a blue hat for you." In the evening, Chu Ho held back her laughter and told Gu Jinglian about how Xiao Bao had pestered her to knit a green hat for him in the afternoon. Gu Jinglian's face turned ashen when he heard this. "Cuckold? Xiao Bao likes green, didn't you know?" Chu Ho continued, "He especially likes green, blue, and purple. But how can this hat be made in green? He doesn't understand the origin of this." Gu Jinglian was disgusted. Why was his son so stupid? It was hard to imagine that this was Gu Jinglian's son. It must be fake. "Does this blue look good?" Chu Ho began to pick a ball of wool, hesitating between the lake blue and bluish gray. Gu Jinglian said, "Lake blue looks better. It suits him." Chu Ho picked the color and started to needle. Recently, she seemed to have become more and more addicted to knitting. She had ordered several books on knitting from the bookstore and was learning the ropes every day. She was enjoying it. Gu Jinglian leaned against the headboard and watched as she knitted back and forth. After training with the scarf, she was now much more adept at knitting. She was considered smarter, so she learned everything faster. Other than her low EQ, she was very enlightened in other aspects. Gu Jinglian snorted coldly and reminded her, "It's late. Time to sleep. There are still a few more needles. I'll be done soon." Gu Jinglian didn't allow her to explain. He took the needles from her hands and placed them on the bedside table. He hugged her and comforted her, "You're not allowed to knit anymore." But since he had already said so, she could only obediently let him cover her with the blanket and turn off the lights. Gu Jinglian hugged her and said, "Good night." "Good night." Chapter 3756. On the day of the party, Chu Ho had completely forgotten about this matter. It was not until he called to ask where she was that she remembered this matter. Chu Ho packed the wool and steel needles and was ready to go out. Gu Jinglian happened to be at home. He was a little surprised to see her suddenly preparing to go out when she was knitting a hat. "Where are you going?" "Oh, I'm going to a friend's party." "A friend's party?" Gu Jinglian looked at her suspiciously. "You have friends?" Of course I have friends." Gu Jinglian pretended not to care and asked, "Male or female friends?" "They're both women." Chu Ho said again, "Why? Are you checking on me?" "I'm just asking." Gu Jinglian snorted awkwardly. "You're not going to bring me? They're all female friends. Why should I bring you?" Chu Ho smiled. "Don't tell me you're worried about me?" Gu Jinglian smiled. "Huh? Who would have thought that the former top anti-mafia inspector of Interpol, a heroine among women, would actually attend a women's party like an ordinary woman?" Chu Ho said unhappily, "What do you mean? Can I attend? Can I be like a woman?" "Sure." Gu Jinglian raised his eyebrows. "I'll send you there." "No need. I'll just ask Uncle Fu to send me a car." Gu Jinglian was a little angry when he heard this. He was kind enough to send her there, but she did not appreciate it. "I'm worried that you're pregnant and there's no one to take care of you. It's inconvenient." "Stupid woman, you don't appreciate it?" Chu Ho frowned. Although she was used to this guy's awkward personality, she still felt a little uncomfortable. Since you want to send me there so much, don't be so awkward. If you don't want to send me there, then stay at home obediently and don't follow me. After Chu Ho finished speaking, he strode away. When Gu Jinglian heard this, he was momentarily embarrassed. However, he was still worried that she would go to a gathering alone with her pregnant belly, so he shamelessly followed her. Chu Ho glanced at him from the corner of his eye and smiled helplessly. She had to admit that this man was like a child in some ways. He was too childish. However, seeing that he still followed her shamelessly, she turned around and made a few rules. You can come with me, but you can't enter the private room. Why? There are so many women. It's not good for a man like you to go, right? What's wrong with that? In short, if you can't agree, then don't send me there. Gu Jinglian was afraid of her. Okay, I'll stay in another room. Yes. Gu Jinglian drove her to the self-service coffee shop. This self-service coffee shop was one of the more commoner places in the city. The party was split evenly. Chu Ho had already used WeChat to transfer the fees to them. When they arrived at the self-service coffee shop, Gu Jinglian went to park the car. Chu Ho entered the shop first and gave the number of the private room, but was stopped by the waiter. Pay the bill first. Those friends didn't pay for me? No, there were a total of 10 people in the private room. They only paid 400 yuan. They didn't pay for you. 40 yuan per person. Thank you. Chu Ho was a little embarrassed. How could it be? Why didn't they pay for her? Didn't they say that they would book the heads first? She did not bring money. Can I pay on WeChat? Chapter 3757. She paid the bill and was led to the private room by the waiter. When she opened the door, she saw a group of people sitting in the private room. When they saw her, one of them stood up and walked over to her, saying, Chu Ho, right? I'm AI Shui, the one who added you to the group. AI Shui had met her during the prenatal checkup and had added her to the group. However, they had not met since then. Although AI Shui had suggested that they go for the prenatal checkup together, the timing did not match, so they had not met. Come, have a seat. Everyone has been waiting for you for a long time. He sat down in her seat and asked curiously, Is no one paying my bill? Luckily, I still have some money in my WeChat account. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to get in. When everyone heard this, they looked at each other. AI Shui immediately asked, Who's in charge of paying? Everyone looked at a woman sitting in the corner. When the latter heard this, she smiled and said, Hey, I thought she wasn't coming. That's why I didn't pay. Chu Ho said, I didn't say that I would pay. It's just that we agreed to pay together. You should have paid for me. There was nothing wrong with what she said. Since the bill had been paid in advance, it should have been settled beforehand. When the woman heard this, she became a little sarcastic. She was obviously angered by her words, but she restrained her anger and said, You speak as if I care about your 40 yuan. You came so late. Who knew if you were coming? Isn't it just 40 yuan? I'll transfer it to you. There's no need for that. Chu Ho could not be bothered to take the money. 40 yuan was not a lot of money. It was just a matter of principle that had to be made clear. She was more concerned about the matter of principle. When the woman heard this, she felt even more upset. When Chu Ho said this, it made her seem as if she was very calculative. AI Shui quickly tried to smooth things over. We'll settle the bill later. However, Chu Ho, you're really too much. How could you forget about today's gathering? I have to criticize you for that. Chu Ho smiled. I've been taking care of the baby at home, so I forgot the date. I thought it was Friday. Aren't you going to work now? Chu Ho replied, Yeah, I'm not working. Hey, you're only 5 months pregnant. When I was 5 months pregnant, I was still working. Chu Ho said, I used to work as a police officer. Because I was pregnant, I couldn't go out on missions, so I decided to take maternity leave. Everyone sighed. Civil servants are really good. That's right. When I was pregnant, I applied for maternity leave from my supervisor. In the end, she said that I could only apply for maternity leave after 8 months. I endured until 8 months before I went home to rest. Me too. I used to be a customer service employee. I had to look at the computer every day, and I had to deal with those customers on trivial issues. It was really annoying. I'm so envious of Chu-ho. Won't your husband say anything if you stay at home? Chu-ho was a little confused. What will he say? For example, staying at home all day, not working, not earning money, and not doing housework. Chu-ho pursed his lips. It was Gu Jinglian's request to rest at home. In fact, she had already quit her job. Gu Jinglian had forced her not to work as a police officer. She thought about it and felt that the salary was really nothing to Gu Jinglian. Moreover, she was pregnant with twins, so the entire Gu family valued it very much. Therefore, she simply agreed to rest at home so that they would not have to worry about her. Chapter 3758. However, she really didn't know how to do any housework. In the past, when she was taking care of Xiaobao alone, she only knew the basics. Moreover, the Gu family was so big and there were so many servants, so she didn't need to do much. Chu-ho didn't say anything. She only said, "My husband doesn't need me to do any housework." As soon as she said this, the group of people's expressions changed. "I'm so envious. It's good to have a husband who dotes on you. My husband will scold me if I don't filter the water properly. You really can't compare people." Ai Shui asked, "Chu-ho, where's your husband?" "He's outside." "Why didn't you let him in?" "That's not good, is it? He's a man." "So what? Just let him in." Chu-ho smiled. "There's really no need. He can't continue the conversation, so I let him wait for me in another private room. It's fine." Ai Shui was a little depressed. There were so many people who wanted to see how handsome Chu-ho's husband was. If Chu-ho didn't let her husband come out, others would think that she was bragging. Chu-ho was busy asking her for advice. "I want to knit a hat for my little one. Do you think this is right?" Ai Shui had just picked it up to look when someone beside her said strangely, "Io, can't you just buy a hat? It's too tiring to knit one yourself. I won't be happy if it's you. Hats aren't expensive anyway." Chu-ho said, "It's better to buy one than to knit one yourself. My husband wants me to knit one for him. My little one thinks that the one I knit is ugly and refuses to wear it." Ai Shui explained to Chu-ho. Chu-ho had just finished knitting when Ai Shui urged again, "Chu-ho, why don't you let your husband come along? It's so boring to leave him alone in the private room. There are so many of us. We can at least chat and exchange ideas." Chu-ho thought about it and decided not to. No, he's not very good at getting along with others. Gu Jinglian might not buy it. With his personality, if others angered him, he would not give them any face. Ai Shui looked a little embarrassed. Someone said, "Chu-ho, your husband is not someone who can't be seen. Didn't Mei Jiao in the group say that your husband must be very ugly? Hee, let us see it with our own eyes. We will testify for you." Chu-ho said, "Is looks that important? I'm not from the Appearance Association." "Aren't you with your husband because he's handsome?" "It has nothing to do with being handsome." Chu-ho continued, "I'm with him because he's like a man. Men were different from women. Although this world believed in women's rights, men were naturally stronger than women. Therefore, they had to bear heavier responsibilities. Being like a man was a simple problem that many men could not achieve. What she liked about Gu Jinglian was that he was responsible and had the courage of a man. Although his personality was very awkward, he was two-faced and soft-hearted, but he had a sharp tongue. The two of them often bickered, but there was no doubt that Gu Jinglian would protect her. Ai Shui said, "Chu-ho's husband dotes on her a lot. He's tall and handsome, but he doesn't look easy to get along with. I think he's a very cold person." "Cold?" "Yeah, he doesn't smile and looks a little murderous." Is it stupid or murderous?" Chapter 3759. Chu-ho's cell phone suddenly rang. She glanced at the screen. It was Gu Jinglian. She had just answered the call when Gu Jinglian said unhappily, "Come over and pay for me." "Don't you have money on you?" "Yeah." He never had the habit of bringing money with him when he went out. Chu-ho snorted and said, "Then, what about your WeChat? Or Alipay would be fine too." "I don't use these things." Chu-ho was disgusted. This guy was too outdated. What era was this? Although she had only learned how to use WeChat not too long ago. Chu-ho stood up. AI Shui immediately said, I'll pay for it. No need, I have my own. Chu Ho stood up and walked to the front desk. Gu Jinglian stood tall at the front desk. The waiter standing beside him was trembling in fear. He was obviously intimidated by Gu Jinglian's aura. What a terrifying man. His aura was so strong. When Chu Ho paid for him, Gu Jinglian said, Give me a private room. Sir, less than 5 people are not allowed to sit in a private room. If you want, you have to pay the room fee. It's 400 yuan. Gu Jinglian glanced at Chu Ho and asked, Did you bring money? I don't have that much. Usually, when she went out, someone would pay for her. She also didn't have the habit of bringing red packets. The money in her WeChat was obtained from snatching red packets in the group chat. Chu Ho said helplessly, You can sit in the same room as me. When Gu Jinglian heard this, he was satisfied. When Gu Jinglian followed Chu Ho into the private room, a group of people was whispering. However, when they saw Gu Jinglian and Chu Ho walk in after opening the door, everyone was shocked when they saw this man. What a handsome man. His aura was so intimidating. He wasn't just handsome. He was so handsome that he didn't look like a mortal. For a moment, words couldn't describe him. She didn't know who had mentioned it, but AI Shui seemed to have mentioned that Gu Jinglian and Gu Xingxia looked similar. Could it be that they were related in some way? Indeed, they did look alike. Especially the eyebrows and eyes, they were 80% similar. Gu Xingxia. It was unknown who had mentioned this name. Gu Jinglian heard her and glanced at her coldly. He frowned. What did you say? Oh no. That person blushed and immediately said, I used to like a male celebrity called Gu Xingxia. I realized that you look quite similar to him. Gu Jinglian's eyes darkened. You're not allowed to mention his name. The name Gu Xingxia was taboo in the Gu family. In fact, no one knew that the name Gu Xingxia was taboo to Gu Jinglian because of the guilt and self-blame in his heart. Gu Jinglian was initially very repulsed by this younger brother of his. However, later on, he realized that Gu Xingxia had no intention of fighting with him for the power of the Gu family. He gradually let down his guard against him. In fact, as an illegitimate son, Gu Xingxia didn't do anything wrong. However, the reason why Gu Jinglian used to be a thorn in his side and a thorn in his flesh was because Gu Jinglian didn't want the power of the Gu family to fall into the hands of an illegitimate son. Later on, Gu Jinglian didn't hold any grudges against Gu Xingxia. However, he couldn't accept Gu Xingxia's death. He didn't deserve to die. If he had insisted on sending him to the airport back then, none of this would have happened. Chapter 3760. He didn't want anyone to mention this name again. However, Gu Jinglian's tone obviously frightened everyone. The woman was a little unwilling to be yelled at, but she didn't dare to say anything in front of Gu Jinglian. After Gu Jinglian sat down in the private room, for some reason, the atmosphere was a little tense. It was a little awkward. These people were chatting enthusiastically just now and even encouraged Chu Ho to bring Gu Jinglian into the private room. However, when Gu Jinglian really entered the private room, they didn't dare to say anything. This man sat there like a big iceberg. Later, Chu Ho also sensed that the atmosphere was not right and found an excuse to leave early. As soon as Gu Jinglian and Chu Ho left, the others began to whisper. Who is Chu Ho's husband? He seems to have a strong aura. I feel that he is either rich or noble. I heard from Chu Ho that she doesn't have to do anything at home. It seems that her husband must be very rich. I remember, her husband is called Gu Jinglian, AI Shui said. I asked Chu Ho her name, but I noticed that she doesn't call him husband. Instead, she calls him by his name. What is it? Gu Jinglian? What did you say? Before AI Shui finished speaking, someone stood up excitedly. Gu Jinglian. Yes, if I remember correctly, that should be his name. You must have remembered wrongly. That person immediately said, It can't be Gu Jinglian. Do you know who Gu Jinglian is? AI Shui shook her head in confusion. Then do you know the Gu family in the capital? Yes. The head of the Gu family is Gu Jinglian. The Gu family in the capital is a super rich family, not inferior to the former Mu family at all. Now, they are also on par with the Xingyu Financial Group. The Xingyu Financial Group was founded by Mu Yazhi. It can be said that these two families are side by side. Gu Jinglian from the Gu family in Beijing. If it's really me, then wouldn't Chu Ho be a rich madam? AI Shui pursed her lips. But I didn't remember wrongly, did I? Because this name is very recognizable. After all, there aren't many men with this name. Moreover, I have a special impression of Lien. Chu Ho's name had a he in it, while her husband's name had a Lien in it. I was just saying that their names are very loving. Are you serious? Really? The group fell silent. Some of the people who had ridiculed Chu Ho before felt a little uneasy. So, Chu Ho's husband has quite the background. He's a big shot? If I offend her, she might come looking for trouble. She dares. Another person retorted, it's a lawful society now. Why should we be afraid of those mobs? Don't underestimate the Gu family. Legal system? The rules of society now are set by these big shots. The weak are prey to the strong. Those without status don't even have the right to speak. AI Shui nodded and said, I'll go back later and ask Chu Ho. Well, it's better to ask clearly. If it's really Gu Jinglian, who knows, maybe you can build a good relationship with Chu Ho and have more connections. In the future, you can even have some connections with the Gu family. She has such high standards. She's not someone you can associate with just because you want to. You can't say that. Everyone was silent for a while. Chapter 3761. On the way home. Chu Ho sat in the back seat and looked out of the window. Gu Jinglian suddenly asked, Who are those people? Oh, I know them from the group. In the future, don't interact with these people. Gu Jinglian added, I don't like people who speak in a strange way. Chu Ho also nodded. Even without Gu Jinglian's reminder, she also felt that they were not the same kind of people. She was not good at socializing. In addition, some pregnant people loved to gossip because they were idle at home. She did not like it. When Chu Ho reached home, she turned on her phone and saw many WeChat messages from AI Shui. Chu Ho, is your husband Gu Jinglian from the Gu family in Beijing? There seems to be some unhappiness today. Please don't take it to heart. By the way, she asked me to return the $40 you gave her previously. A red packet of $40. She did not know why, but after returning from the gathering, AI Shui's attitude towards her had become much more cautious. She was afraid that she would say something unpleasant and make her unhappy. She felt that she was trembling with fear, as if she was in awe of her. Chu Ho replied, whether or not he's from the Gu family, there's nothing special about it. However, AI Shui did not reply for a long time. She did not know if she was busy or if she did not know how to reply and was deliberating. After a long time, AI Shui only replied carelessly, You're more than 5 months pregnant. Take care of the baby. In the future, if it's convenient for you, I can teach you how to knit a sweater. Chu Ho replied indifferently. She felt that AI Shui's attitude made her a little uncomfortable. Since returning from the gathering, the WeChat group had become much quieter. Hence, Chu Ho directly left the group and simply took care of the baby in peace. When she was more than 6 months pregnant, Chu Ho cut her hair a little shorter. The short hair that reached her ears was like a knife. This was done behind Gu Jinglian's back. When Gu Jinglian came back and saw that her hair was cut a little short, he was obviously a little unhappy. However, Chu Ho said that her hair was too long and it wasn't convenient for her to take a shower, so he didn't say anything. Unknowingly, her belly was getting bigger and bigger. In the early stages of pregnancy, there was no movement. But as time went on, her stomach grew bigger and bigger, as if she had been pumped full of air. Gradually, when she was 7 months pregnant, Chu Ho began to pant when she walked with a big belly. It seemed that his physical fitness had also deteriorated. Uncle Fu hired a yoga tutor. When he was free, Chu Ho would practice yoga. When she was 7 months pregnant, everyone in the Gu family was very nervous. After all, there was a saying that one could live for 8 months but not 7. At 7 months, one had to be the most cautious. It was only when they had endured for more than 8 months that everyone breathed a sigh of relief. When she was more than 8 months pregnant, Gu Jinglian's attitude also changed a lot. Although he had been very attentive to Chu Ho ever since she was pregnant, Gu Jinglian was even more nervous when she was more than 8 months pregnant. Some of the family business matters were temporarily put aside and he was wholeheartedly accompanying her to take care of the baby. The days of pregnancy were especially difficult. And Gu Jinglian was by her side and would do things himself. For example, when Chu Ho wanted to eat an apple, a certain man didn't wait for Uncle Fu to serve him. He took the initiative to personally wash the apple, peel it, and even carefully cut it. He inserted a toothpick into the apple and brought it to her. Chu Ho was a little surprised. Chapter 3762. Chu Ho was too lazy to hold them with his hands, so he patiently fed them to her one by one. Once, Uncle Fu passed by the study. When he was tidying up the study for him, he saw Chu Ho sleeping in Gu Jinglian's arms. Gu Jinglian was holding a book in his hands. Unlike the reference books he used to hold, he was now focused on researching the problems of postpartum care. It had to be said that Chu Ho was very fortunate. It wasn't that Gu Jinglian didn't have any women in the past, but those women didn't receive the same treatment as her. They served her like she was the Empress Dowager, fearing that there would be any mistakes. Even Chu Ho laughed at them for being too nervous. It was just a pregnancy. How could they be so exaggerated? It wasn't that she hadn't given birth before. When she gave birth to Xiao Bao, she had endured such a long period of time alone. Now, everyone in the Gu family was eyeing her covetously. It was too exaggerated. However, even though she said that, the Gu family's attention still warmed her heart. After all, it was the first time in her life that she was valued so much. This was the warmth of a family. Chu Ho recalled that when she was on a mission and camping in the rainforest, one of the mercenaries who was on the same mission as her suddenly took out a photo. She glanced at it and saw a 5-year-old daughter in the photo. She was very cute and beautiful, and her eyebrows and eyes resembled his. He said proudly, "My daughter." However, after a pause, he said sadly, "It's a pity that until now, I haven't given her mother a proper status." He was away on missions all year round, and they spent more time apart than together. After so many years of feelings, he didn't even have the time to arrange a wedding before his daughter was born. In the past, he was a sharp and arrogant man. However, after having a daughter, perhaps it was because he had become a father, he became much more mature and steady. He said, "After this mission is over, I'll earn another sum of money and go back to get married and have children." Unexpectedly, during that mission, he was accidentally injured, and a large part of his left arm was broken from the elbow. It could be said that he had bid farewell to his mercenary career. After announcing his retirement, Chu Ho walked him out of the mercenary team. He saw the woman who was carrying a little girl walk in front of him. The little girl looked at the man's broken arm and cried in fear. However, the man's heart ached terribly. Even though his arm was broken, he still insisted on hugging her and coaxing her, "Daddy will always be with you from now on. I won't go anywhere." During the amputation, the man did not frown at all. However, when he held his daughter, he cried uncontrollably. The gentleness in his eyes was something she had never seen before. A father's love was really heavy and silent. It was the same for Gu Jinglian. Although he never said anything on the surface, sometimes when she was lying on the bed and he thought she was asleep, he would secretly press his ear against her belly to listen. Whenever he heard the slightest trace of fetal movement, he would reveal a gentle smile. He would even talk to the two little guys through their bellies. "Can you hear Daddy's voice?" Gu Jinglian gently caressed her belly and said gently, "We'll meet in a little more than a month." As he said this, he seemed to feel that he was a little too childish and laughed. Chapter 3763. The fetal movements became more and more frequent and obvious. At 9 months, Gu Jinglian could even see the baby's fists and feet when the fetus moved. It was too magical. If he had not experienced it himself, it would be hard to imagine that giving birth to life was such a magical thing. It was magical and sacred. Gu Jinglian began to imagine how the two little guys would look like after they were born a month later. The girl would look like him and the boy would look like her. Having a son and a daughter was the happiest thing in life. Have you noticed? President Gu has been smiling a lot recently. He used to be so serious, but now, sitting alone in the office, it seems like he often smiles to himself. Yes, I've noticed it too. President Gu never smiled in the past and looked cold. Now, there are a few times when I walk into the office and accidentally see him smiling foolishly at a pile of documents. It's unbelievable. But I can only pretend that I didn't see it, huh? Just as the secretaries were whispering to each other, a stern voice suddenly sounded. What are you talking about? Well, the group of people looked up and saw Gu Jinglian standing in front of them expressionlessly. They were a little surprised. President Gu. Gu Jinglian glanced at them coldly. Are you very free? We're talking about work. Is that so? Gu Jinglian narrowed his eyes. Why do I seem to hear you mention my name? Oh, one of the female employees was quick-witted and immediately said, We're talking. Young Mistress Gu is 9 months pregnant. She should be giving birth soon, right? Yes, we're imagining how the 2 Xiaobao babies will look after they're born. The little princess will look like President Gu, and the little master will look like young Mistress Gu. One had to know that Gu Jinglian was most concerned about Chu Ho and the 2 unborn Xiaobao babies. Therefore, they hurriedly catered to his interests and diverted his attention. When Gu Jinglian heard this, he snorted and raised his eyebrows slightly. However, for the first time, he did not say anything. Instead, he said coldly, Do your own thing. However, just as he turned around, he thought of something and curiously turned back. You said that a daughter looks like her father. What's the basis? Of course, my daughter looks just like her father. That's right. Anyway, all the children I've seen, as long as they're girls, look more like their fathers. I don't know why, but at least the ones I've seen are all like that. It's reasonable to exist. Otherwise, they wouldn't all say that. The corners of Gu Jinglian's lips curled up slightly. Although he tried his best to restrain himself, the proud curve of his lips was obvious. I hope so. After he finished speaking, his face returned to its usual coldness. He cleared his throat and returned to his office. When he entered the office, the people at the secretary desk breathed a sigh of relief. They winked at each other and laughed secretly. After getting off work early, Gu Jinglian returned to the Gu residence. However, he saw Uncle Fu and Aunt Qin waiting at the door. They looked around and saw the car arrive. They immediately went up to it, but when they saw that it was Gu Jinglian who got out of the car, they sighed in disappointment. Gu Jinglian got out of the car. Seeing their anxious expressions, he was a little unhappy. What's wrong? Aunt Qin shook her head and said, I thought Xiao He was back. Chapter 3764. Uncle Fu immediately explained, Chu Ho went out in the morning and said that he would be back in the afternoon. But he's still nowhere to be seen. Gu Jinglian asked, Did you call him? I did, but the call was hung up. Hung up? Gu Jinglian was a little alarmed. No matter what, Chu Ho would not hang up on anyone. He did not believe it, so he made a call himself. The moment he heard the beeping sound, the call was hung up. Gu Jinglian's brows immediately furrowed. What's going on? He asked Uncle Fu, Did she say where she was going? Yes, where? It seems like a friend asked her out. Someone called Xianxia? Xianxia? Yes, I heard that she sent a message to her on WeChat, and then, without another word, Gu Jinglian got into the car and closed the door. Ignoring Uncle Fu and Nanny Qin's anxious questions, he instructed, Drive. Mr. Gu, where are we going? Drive first. Gu Jinglian immediately dialed a number and ordered someone to check Meng Xingshue's address. Within a few minutes, the address was sent over via text message. He gave the address and 10 minutes later, the car stopped at a villa area. As soon as he got out of the car, the private bodyguards guarding the door came forward to stop him. Gu Jinglian did not even look and broke through the barrier. Just as he passed by the courtyard, he saw Meng Qingxue taking care of the flowers and plants that she had painstakingly cultivated in the courtyard. Meng Qingxue. He called her name. Meng Qingxue heard the noise and turned around. When she saw that it was Gu Jinglian, she smiled. Young Master Gu, why are you here? Where's Chu Ho? Chu Ho? Gu Jinglian frowned. She's not with you? This question stunned Meng Qingxue. After a long while, it was only when Gu Jinglian urged her again that she regained her senses and shook her head blankly. No, I didn't. Uncle Fu said that you asked her to meet you, But she went out in the morning and hasn't returned home yet. What? Meng Qingxue was completely dumbfounded. I didn't ask her out. Isn't she 9 months pregnant now? She's about to give birth. How could I ask her out? Don't lie to me. Meng Qingxue was anxious and worried. How could I lie? It's true. She said that she agreed to meet you because you contacted Chu Ho on WeChat. WeChat? Meng Qingxue was even more dumbfounded. I think my WeChat account was hacked. Because I don't have any friends on WeChat, I wasn't in a hurry to get it back. Gu Jinglian was completely stunned. Meng Qingxue also sensed that something was wrong. She frowned, but didn't dare to think of other possibilities. Gu Jinglian was about to leave when his cell phone suddenly rang. However, it wasn't the ringtone, but the sound of FaceTime. He took out his cell phone and saw that the person who had initiated FaceTime was Chu Ho's ID. FaceTime was a video calling software built into Apple's iOS. It connected to the internet through Wi-Fi or cellular data and installed FaceTime on both devices. It enabled video calls between the devices. When Gu Jinglian saw that Chu Ho had sent FaceTime, he finally felt relieved. He picked up the call, but the video screen on the other end was dark. He asked, Chu Ho, where are you? There was no response from the other end for a long time. Gu Jinglian couldn't help but feel nervous again. Chu Ho? Young Master Gu, long time no see. Suddenly, a hoarse man's voice interrupted him. Gu Jinglian was stunned. He recognized the voice immediately. Chapter 3765. Black Panther was just a nickname. He was a middle-aged man with a knife handle on his face and dark skin. His card-playing style was very fierce. Almost no one was a match for him. This person used to hang out in the Gu family's previous casino. No one knew his real name, but his gambling skills were top-notch. Rather than saying that his gambling skills were top-notch, it was better to say that his skills were top-notch. When he gambled, he would cheat. Using this miraculous trick, he earned a lot of money and made countless gamblers lose their family fortune. Gu Jinglian had set a rule in the casino. If anyone was found to have cheated, they would have to break an arm. Everyone was well aware of Black Panther's skills, but there was no evidence and no one caught him at the scene. Therefore, there was nothing they could do about him. Complaints were heard in the casino. Later, Gu Jinglian gambled with him once. He rarely made a move. If Black Panther had not stirred up trouble in the casino, he would not have bothered. In terms of gambling skills, Gu Jinglian was slightly better. He caught Black Panther red-handed and broke one of his arms according to the rules. Black Panther hated him because of this. However, for a long time after that, there was no news of this person and he almost disappeared. Unexpectedly, how did Chu Ho's phone end up in his hands? Could it be? Gu Jinglian seemed to have expected something. The Gu family had many enemies. Usually, there were many who sought revenge in the underworld. Therefore, Gu Jinglian usually made a move with great momentum and did not let his enemies make a move. However, they had their eyes on Chu Ho. He had clearly hidden her very well. How did she fall into Black Panther's hands? Gu Jinglian could not figure it out. Could it be Black Panther had stolen Meng Qingshue's account and used WeChat to lure Chu Ho out? Thinking of this possibility, Gu Jinglian was almost unable to restrain his anger. Where is she? How rare, how rare. Black Panther sneered sinisterly. I didn't expect that Gu Jinglian, who is rumored to be cold and unreasonable, would have a woman he loves. So, I didn't kidnap the wrong person this time? Young Master Gu, don't be so anxious. She's in my hands now. She's fine. Gu Jinglian immediately requested, let me see her. Sure, if you want to see it, I'll show it to you. The video suddenly lit up. The lights seemed to have been switched on. Then, Chu Ho's figure appeared on the screen. She was chained to a stool. She was conscious, but her mouth was taped, so she couldn't make a sound. Based on the details of the room, it seemed to be a very dark room without a single window. There was an incandescent lamp above her head. Then, a man's scarred face appeared in the video. Is this the woman you want to see? Black Panther was standing behind her. He bent down slightly and pinched Chu Ho's chin hard, as if he was deliberately showing Gu Jinglian the goods. He turned her head and lifted her eyelids for him to see. Look, it's the real deal. Is this woman your woman? Gu Jinglian's expression was tense as he gritted his teeth. Looks like it. Black Panther's gaze fell on Chu Ho's bulging abdomen. He clicked his tongue twice and said, "Her belly is quite big. I'm guessing there's more than one child inside. Hey, it's been 9 months. If you take it out, it should have taken shape, right?" Chapter 3766. Otherwise, you'll definitely tear me into pieces. Black Panther shook his head and said disdainfully, "What era are we in now? It's time to change these lines that haven't changed for thousands of years." Half of the man's body was reflected in the video, but his left sleeve was empty. "Do you see that? You were the one who ordered me to cut off this arm back then. I still remember this." Black Panther smiled coldly and said, "But, to be honest with you, I don't have many days left to live. You can do whatever you want to me. Anyway, even if you send thousands of people to surround me now, I'll just die sooner or later. But, fortunately, there's still a scapegoat." After a pause, Black Panther clicked his tongue again. "How can I only say one? I have 3 scapegoats, your woman and the 2 bastards in her belly." Gu Jinglian clenched his fists. "What do you want? Let me tell you straight, I don't have much time left. Before I die, we should at least settle the score between us, right?" Black Panther said faintly, "Gu Jinglian, let's play a game, how about it? Ha!" His laughter was like that of a wolf. In the empty and dark room, he sounded like a malicious ghost. "So, you were the one who stole Meng Qingshue's account and lured her over? Is that important?" Black Panther said, "What's important is the score between us. If you want to keep your woman and children, I'll give you a chance. Card Archway, Wui Road, 9-2 Underground Warehouse. Come alone. Remember, if you come alone, I'll make sure that she has one less person in her belly. Don't think that I'm afraid of death. Anyway, I don't have much time left. If you break the rules of the game, I won't give you a chance to choose again." With that, he hung up on FaceTime. Gu Jinglian walked to the driver's seat almost without hesitation and opened the door. "Get out of the car." The driver, who had heard everything just now, hesitated. "Young Master Gu, you can't go alone. The bodes ill. Get out of the car." "Young Master Gu." Gu Jinglian abruptly pulled out the pistol from his belt and aimed it at his temple. "I'm warning you, my patience is limited. Now, get out of the car." The driver opened his mouth and broke out in a cold sweat. He immediately got out of the car, but Gu Jinglian pushed him aside and got into the car. He closed the door and drove the car without waiting for anyone to stop him. He sped towards the address Black Leopard gave him. On the way, Black Leopard sent a video to confirm that Gu Jinglian was really going there alone. Only then was he relieved. "Gu Jinglian, I'll wait for you. 30 minutes, I won't wait for you after that." Black Leopard then hung up the phone. Gu Jinglian was so angry that he threw his phone on the seat. He stepped on the accelerator and sped on the national highway leading to the destination. 20 minutes later, he arrived at his destination, only to find that it was actually at the foot of a barren mountain. There were no signs of anyone living in the surroundings. There was only an abandoned warehouse in front of him. It looked eerie. It was already dusk, which made the warehouse even scarier. Gu Jinglian made a call. The call went through and Black Leopard asked, "Have you arrived? I'm at the entrance. Why isn't anyone here to welcome me?" Chapter 3767. Gu Jinglian frowned and was about to reply when Black Panther said nonchalantly, "So be it. Anyway, it's useless." With that, he hung up the phone. Gu Jinglian walked to the entrance of the warehouse. Just as he crossed the yellow line in front of the door, he heard a creak. The heavy shutter door seemed to be equipped with a sensor and opened automatically. He walked into the warehouse until the shutter door fell heavily behind him. A thick layer of dust rose in the warehouse. Gu Jinglian covered his mouth in disgust and waved it away. The lights came on. He raised his eyes and looked around, only to see a large table in the huge warehouse. There was a man sitting in front of the table. He was sitting on what looked like a torture stool. On the table was a card-dealing machine that was often seen in casinos. On the man's left was a television. At this moment, the screen was flashing with static. The man was wearing a sack on his head. Gu Jinglian walked over and took the sack away. He saw that it was one of the Gu family's subordinates who was in charge of maintaining order in the casino. It could be said that he was Gu Jinglian's right-hand man in the casino. The man's mouth was also covered with a layer of tape. When he saw Gu Jinglian, his eyes were filled with fear. This fear was not because he was afraid of anything, but because he did not expect Gu Jinglian to really come. Gu Jinglian immediately tore the tape off his mouth. The man immediately said, "Mr. Gu, you shouldn't have come." "What's going on?" "Mr. Gu, please leave quickly. Don't worry about me." This subordinate thought that Gu Jinglian had come for him. He did not know that Chu Ho had also been kidnapped. Gu Jinglian frowned. "Qingjiu, what's going on?" I don't know. When I woke up, I was already here." As she spoke, the static on the television screen flickered for a while. Then, it was connected to a black and white video. On the screen, Black Panther sat in front of the camera and looked at the camera calmly. Through the camera, it was as if he was looking directly at him. "Since you're here, you're a guest. Sit down." Gu Jinglian suddenly realized something. He looked around and suddenly found surveillance cameras in the corners of the walls. Chu Ho was not in the room. Similarly, Black Panther wasn't around either. And this room was already filled with surveillance cameras. He had already entered his trap. Gu Jinglian didn't know what other tricks there were in this room. Then he heard Black Panther speak again. "Don't be so nervous. Sit down. It's just a game." "Game? Your favorite game?" Black Leopard smiled. "Do you see the dealing machine on the table?" Gu Jinglian appeared very calm. "Yes, I heard that CEO Gu is best at blackjack. Back then, I lost to you because we played blackjack. Why don't we end it with 21 points today?" "All right." Gu Jinglian asked, "How do we play?" "First of all, it's gambling. We need to bet in chips. I wonder what chips CEO Gu has brought?" Gu Jinglian asked again, "How much do you want?" "I don't want money." Black Panther suddenly said meaningfully, "How about this, I'll let you choose." Black Panther turned the camera. Gu Jinglian saw Chu Ho on the screen, who was still tied up. He suddenly understood what Black Panther meant by chips. Chapter 3768. I'll give you two choices. One is your woman and your two children. However, I'm guessing that you won't agree to it. So, do you see the box under the table? Gu Jinglian took half a step back. As expected, there was a box under the table. He was a little hesitant. "Don't worry. There's no bomb inside. If I really wanted to kill you, I wouldn't have hidden the bomb in this box." Gu Jinglian took a deep breath and picked up the box. When he opened it, there were two strange-looking torture devices in the box. One of them seemed to be an iron headgear. However, this headgear hid an extraordinary mystery. When worn on the head, there were two electric drill bits that were aimed at the temples. If the mechanism was triggered, the drill bits would be nailed into the temples until they pierced through the skull. The other one seemed to be a hanging platform. When the mechanism was triggered, the person's fingers would be cut off. These two items will be your wager. You can choose from them. When you're ready, the game will officially start. However, I have something to remind you. Black Panther narrowed his eyes. I won't use anything to restrain you. However, if you try to escape and leave this warehouse before the game ends, then I'll perish together with your woman and the two bastards in my womb. Chu Ho, who was behind him, let out an angry roar. Gu Jinglian suddenly said, "Chu Ho, don't worry. With me here, you'll be fine." Then, he took out the two torture devices. He couldn't help but sneer in his heart. No wonder Black Panther said that it didn't matter even if he brought a gun. There was no use for it at all. Indeed, there was no use for it. This man still wanted to torture him ruthlessly even before he died, until he was better off dead. However, the person playing chess with him was his right-hand man, Qingjiu. Qingjiu was his most loyal subordinate. Gu Jinglian's expression became more tense. Black Panther said, "First, put together the points. The one with the higher points will choose the torture device." The card dealer dealt two cards. At the same time, the handcuffs on one of Qingjiu's arms were automatically unlocked. One of Qingjiu's arms was freed. "Boss, you can still make it if you leave now." Qingjiu lowered her voice and said, "Don't worry about me. Leave now. I can't leave. Gu Jinglian's voice was soft but firm. He sat down on his seat. At the same time he asked, "Why should I believe that you won't hurt her if I play this game with you? You know what kind of person I am. Back then, when I lost to you, I also obeyed your rules of the game and took the initiative to break one of your arms. Similarly, I also follow the rules. Heh, if you believe me, then continue. If you don't believe me, then do as you please." Gu Jinglian gritted his teeth. However, he had no choice at all. Believe? He had a 50% chance of saving Chuho. If he didn't believe it, then he wouldn't even have a 0.1% chance. No matter what, he had to take a gamble. Flip the cards. Gu Jinglian opened the card in his hand. It was a 6 of clubs. Qingjiu looked at him and finally understood what Chuho meant to Gu Jinglian. Hence, she also flipped her cards. Jack of hearts. Qingjiu was the bigger one. He would choose the torture device first. Chapter 3769. A mask and a hanging rack. If he chose the mask, he would definitely die if he lost. If he chose the hanging rack, he would only lose 5 fingers even if he lost. Black Panther said, "Congratulations, Qingjiu. If I were you, I would definitely choose the hanging rack. Although Gu Jinglian was once your master, you wouldn't still want to be loyal at such a critical moment, would you? Don't worry, if you choose the hanging rack and Gu Jinglian wears that mask, he will definitely die if he loses." Ha! His wild laughter was especially ear-piercing. Gu Jinglian lowered his head and did not speak. If Qingjiu betrayed him and chose the hanging rack, then he would definitely work hard and win. Qingjiu's gaze was fixed on the 2 instruments of torture, his whole body almost trembling. In the face of death, human selfishness seemed to be constantly causing trouble. He still had a daughter. Because of the mixing of crooks in the casino, his wife had left him long ago, and he depended on his daughter. He could not give up his life just like that. Absolutely not. In his heart, there was a thought that kept reminding him that nothing was more important than his life and his daughter. Right now, as Black Panther said, was loyalty really that important? Qingjiu suddenly looked at the screen and said, "I have the right to choose now, right? No matter what decision I make, it's my right and can't be changed, right? Gambling, the rules of the game must be followed. Of course, you have the right to choose. Fight hard and you will win." Okay. Qingjiu said, "Okay," several times in a trembling voice. Suddenly, he raised his head and looked deeply at Gu Jinglian. Gu Jinglian looked at him calmly, as if waiting for his choice. He suddenly smiled and did not say anything. He stretched out his hand and chose the mask. Even Gu Jinglian was shocked. He did not expect Qingjiu to be able to overcome the fear of death and choose to be loyal to him from the beginning to the end. "Do you still remember what I said to you when I first entered the Gu family? In life, I am yours. In death, I am also the soul of the Gu family." Qingjiu smiled and bit his lip hard, putting the mask on his head. Gu Jinglian's fist, which was hidden under the table, trembled slightly. On the screen, Black Panther was also shocked, but he did not say anything in the end. "Gu Jinglian, it's your turn. You should be familiar with this thing, right? This is one of the punishments that casinos use on gamblers who cheat." "Of course I'm familiar with it." Gu Jinglian fixed the hanger and calmly fixed the 5 slender fingers on it one by one. "Rules are rules. I will obey them. I hope that you will be no exception." Black Panther grunted. "All right, let the game begin." Blackjack, one of the casino games. The game was played by 2 to 6 people, using 52 cards other than the Joker and the Joker. The goal of the players was to make the sum of the cards in their hand not exceed 21 points and try to make it as big as possible. When 2 people played, it was usually a deck of cards. Cards 2 to 9 were calculated according to the number of origin points. K, Q, J, and 10 cards were all counted as 10 points. They were usually recorded as T, which meant 10. Ace cards could be counted as 1 point or 11 points. It was up to the player to decide. When the player stopped playing, the points would be counted as the maximum and try not to explode.